Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. My ex-girlfriend is everywhere, all female Avengers are shocked. Chapter 1. Beep, beep. Under the night sky, S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters sounded a stern alarm. Captain America rushed out of the restroom, and roared with an angry face, "That little fool, when did you secretly take my shield away again?" Suddenly, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who were awakened by the alarm smirked and yawned one by one, turning their heads back to rest. "It's okay. It must be Joe who stole the captain's shield again to develop other uses. I thought that someone with no eyesight broke into our territory. It turned out that the captain's shield was stolen again. Let's go, the captain will go and get the shield back by himself." The indifferent voices of the agents echoed in the ears, and Captain America's face turned green. "How many times is this? Helped myself fight and defeated the evil Hydra, the shield symbolizing the freedom of the United States, how many times was stolen by that fool? For the first time, he stole his shield, made a hat and put it on his head, with a cloak on his shoulders, and ran around on the training ground. He said that such a dress is called a hero in the ancient civilization of the East. That is, people who can do noble things for the people in the country. But will heroes steal things? When I questioned him, the fool said with a smile, this is robbing the rich and helping the poor. For the second time, he stole his shield, installed a huge amounts of iron bucket on it, and then beat it round and round with a training rubber rope. He said it was called a spinning top. Poor my shield paint is about to fall off, and the five-pointed star symbolizing the freedom of the United States has been messed up. For the third time, the surface was polished and painted with a bright color, and it was placed on the corner of the parking lot as a convex mirror. For the fourth time, it was used as a pot cover. The fifth time. Captain America has forgotten how many times his shield was lost, and how many times that little fool humiliated his shield. He slammed a fist against the wall, angrily took out his cell phone, and dialed a call. "Hi, Natasha Romanoff, where are you now?" Across the phone, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff is wearing a tight sports vest and shorts, sweating on her private training ground. Crystal beads of sweat flowed slowly on her wheat-colored skin, along the neck, along the collarbone, across the high bulge, and flowed into the Y-shaped gathering place. Crack! With a soft beep, the flash freezes. Black Widow frowned slightly, waved his hand as if driving a fly, and then asked, "Steve, what happened again?" Captain America gritted his teeth and said, "That kid in your family took my shield secretly again." "EMMMMMMM." A flash of embarrassment flashed on Black Widow's delicate face, and he waved to the Chinese youth who was looking at the high-definition big picture while facing the camera screen. "Joe, come here." The young man raised his head, took out the memory card of the camera and put it in his mouth, ran over and said vaguely, "Master, you never want me to delete the photos." Natasha Romanoff supported his forehead and looked at the Chinese youth with a desperate look, feeling that his brain started to ache again. "I originally thought that he was a genius, so I would rescue him from the eyelids of the two monster families in the ghost place of Fox, and also accept him as an apprentice. Unexpectedly, this guy is a mixture of culprit plus fool. Before he met him, he fell in love with a beautiful 17-year-old high school girl, and at the same time stepped on two boats to fall in love with the pearl of the monster family. Finally, it was discovered by the parents and almost shot to pieces by those monsters. Now I even dared to take pictures of my teachers, and at the beginning, I only took secretly, and now it has developed into a fair and honest picture." Natasha Romanoff resisted the urge to slap him and warned herself hard in her heart that she must not kill him as a disciple. After taking a deep breath, she tried to ask in a calm tone, "Did you go get Steve's shield again?" The young man shook his head firmly and said, "No. I definitely didn't get it this time." Black Widow said into the phone, "Look, Steve, it wasn't Joe who took it this time." On the other side of the phone, Steve looked gloomy and snarled, "Where are you now? I want to see him right away." Black Widow rolled his eyes and said, "EMMMM, we are training the strength of the weak at the Washington beach, listen to the sound of the waves." After speaking, she raised her phone and pointed it at Joe on the side. Joe Wei pursed his lips slightly, simulating the sound of waves and sea breeze. Captain America frowned and said, "Then don't go, I'll go to you right away." Afterwards, he hung up the phone, rode a motorcycle and rushed to the beach in Washington. He was sure of his own pot. Nonsense. His shield must have been taken away by that fool Joe. No one except him can do this silently. Boom. As soon as Captain America twisted the accelerator, the cool motorcycle roared out from the secret passage of SHIELD headquarters and merged into the traffic on the street. On the private training ground, Black Widow hung up the phone, and a smile of excitement suddenly appeared on his face. Give 5. She reached out her palm, and Joe, a Chinese youth, hurriedly reached out and gave her a slap. It's so beautiful, Master. I think Mr. Steve is rushing to the beach in a hurry, and I never thought that we were actually here. Black Widow's exquisite pretty face was full of pride, and said, Joe, this is just a skill that a qualified agent must have. This is also one of the courses you need to fully master. Joe hurriedly nodded and praised. Although any qualified agent can do this, it will definitely not be seamless like Master's antelope horns. Disciples still need to learn more from Master. Black Widow's face was reddened by his blow, and he said with a slight embarrassment, Don't squat here, take advantage of Steve's being led away, you quickly give me the pancake fruit you mentioned earlier for me to eat. Quote. After finishing speaking, she patted her waistline with obvious lower abdomen, and said distressed-edly, It's all because of you fool, my old lady has gained several pounds during this time, so I need to do more exercise. Do you want to exercise? Joe's eyes lit up, feeling that the memory card stuck between his teeth was hungry and thirsty again. Hemp egg, sporty Black Widow, that's nothing to say. The actor who played the Black Widow in the previous life can make Durant willing to drink the bath water, not to mention the more refined and beautiful Black Widow originally on this plane. It's definitely something that no man can resist. I traveled to this plane and spent more than 10 years in a muddle-headed manner. As a result, because the beauty was so beautiful, she played 2 boats with her hands and feet, and was almost killed by the monster of that family. By chance, she was rescued by the widow sister and she was accepted as the only apprentice. After spending more than 2 years in S.H.I.E.L.D., he finally awakening Goldfinger some time ago. And taking pictures, but Goldfinger has become stronger. My ambition is to be a great photographer too. Guru. Joe Luo swallowed his saliva, and took a trot to move the camera and the cleaned Captain America shield, as well as a small alcohol stove. What are you doing? Black Widow frowned, looking at the alcohol stove and shield close at hand, and Joe Luo, who was holding the camera and staring at her, her mouth twitched. Joe Luo waved his hand, stirring the already prepared batter, holding the camera up and saying, Master, leave me alone and continue your exercise. Although this kind of food is delicious, it is easy to get fat after eating it. Hearing that he was going to get fat, Black Widow put aside other doubts. Since accepting this apprentice, her recipes have become more and more diversified, but this apprentice's cuisine from the East is like opening her seal, and she has successfully transformed from a cold-blooded agent into one foodie. In order to eat, in order not to gain weight, let him play whatever else he wants. The widow's sister sighed silently, and then faced Yi Luo and started lifting the iron. Zitza. The grease inside the shield creaked. Joe Luo skillfully moved the batter in with one hand and began to fry thin ice. The other hand is holding the camera and clicking the shutter. Wow, this posture is good. It seems that Master is really majestic and mighty. Oye, this neck-raising movement is beautiful, and it highlights Master's curvaceousness even more. Yeah, here's another one from this angle. Click, click. Joe Luo kept pressing the shutter, making the widow's widow lifter's face red and blue. This fool doesn't stop at all, she muttered, turned her back to him, and continued to lift the iron. However, Joe Luo behind him was even more excited. This pose. In this situation, I just want to be an assassin and use my dagger to penetrate the Master. Oops, squat down. I want to lie down. Hey, this posture, this apartment type. I can kill people without seeing blood. Click, click. The shutter sound still keeps on, one after another. The high-definition large pictures are stored in the memory card. In front, the widow sister was almost out of breath when she lifted the iron. Asshole, when are you going to shoot? She turned around and scolded. Joe Luo smirked, and skillfully took out the memory card and stuffed it into his mouth, so angry that the widow's sister almost killed the fool with a barbell. Joe Luo, you'd better not make the pancake fruit paste, or don't blame my old lady for doubling your training intensity today. The extremely angry widow's sister called out Zhou Luo's name completely for the first time, and her eyes almost burst into flames. This fool is almost mad at her. The skills used by the agent to hide the blade in his mouth are used by the fool to hide the memory card, or candidly take pictures of his own memory card. It's too cheap. But the widow's sister was still a little bit dark in her heart. Hey, his own charm is still unstoppable, and even his only disciples have been made so blatant by his own charm. Zhou Luo saw the slight smile outlined at the corner of her mouth, and he was instantly relieved. It seems that the widow's face is angry at her actions, but her heart is secretly refreshed. Could it be that this is the legendary mouth-to-mouth integrity? It seems that if you want to complete the camera mission as soon as possible, you can speed up the progress a bit. Quote. He calculated it in his heart, and the movements of his hands were not slow in the slightest. Beat the eggs. Brush the sauce. Sprinkle chopped green onions. Wrap in the prepared lettuce, braised pork, and ham. OJBK. Seeing his first pancake fruit, Zhou Luo nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. Although it has passed, the craftsmanship is still there. Is this your hamburger? It's delicious. Compared with your food, our country's food is no different from garbage. The widow's sister held a pancake fruit in one hand in a posture of lifting an iron, and opened a bow from left to right. While admiring, don't forget to belittle the United States crude food culture. In front of her, Zhou Luo was holding the pancake fruit in one hand, while the other hand continued to fry. No way, the widow's sister, as an agent, eats a lot more than ordinary women. In front of him, in a dimension that the widow's sister can't even see on this plane, a semi-transparent virtual screen is flashing blue light. Super God Photographer System. Host. Zhou Luo. Personal ability. Super affinity. You have a strange ability when you travel. There is a 90% chance that a righteous or neutral hero will have a good impression of you. Main occupation. Photographer, recording beautiful moments and extracting ability from student photos. Main skills. 1. Photography. Record beautiful moments and freeze frames. The qualified photos taken can increase the experience value of extraction skills. 2. Extract LV1 46/50. A skill or attribute of the corresponding character can be extracted from the photos taken, and the current ability completeness is 10%, only available for students who are your life mentor. Deputy occupation. Life mentor, guide those who only know how to fight and kill lost lambs, develop their lifelong hobbies. Student. 1. Natasha Normanoff Black Widow Foodie LV1 5/5 can be upgraded. Looking at the data on the system panel, Zhou Luo's eyes flashed with excitement. Not easy. The widow's sister finally took a crucial step on the road of eating goods. Ding. Natasha Normanoff's Foodie sub-professional level can be upgraded to LV2. Will it be upgraded immediately? The cold system prompt echoed in his ears. Zhou Luo didn't have any hesitation, so he chose upgrade directly. Ding. Natasha Normanoff upgraded to Food LV2, increased smell, taste, digestion ability, and upper body strength by 20%. The next upgrade experience value is 0/10. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting the first LV2 student, all attributes are increased by 50%. With successive system prompts, Zhou Luo clearly felt that his body was strengthening at a terrifying speed, and it was an all-round improvement. And the widow's sister, who was eating the pancake fruit, suddenly felt that her body seemed a little different. She could clearly feel that the oriental burger in her hand tasted more fragrant, and the taste became stronger the moment the taste buds exploded. It's delicious. After the widow's sister ate 2 sets of pancakes 3 times and 5 times 2, her slender fingers were bitten on her rainbow lips and sucking making Zhou Luo, who captured this moment and pressing the shutter, slightly changed. Zhou, I want more. The widow's sister's rainbow lips slightly opened, and she cast an eye toward him. Grandma's widowed sister is so confused. If Zhou Luo were not afraid of being hot, he would definitely put the pancake fruit on his dagger and let the widow's sister kneel and eat it. However, now that he is still a mortal fetus, it is easy to burn at this temperature. Putting aside the idea that he might cut off his children and grandchildren, Zhou Luo skillfully wrapped the pancakes with fruits, and then handed them to the widow's sister, who could not wait. Hanging, squinting his eyes and smelling it, suddenly intoxication appeared on the delicate pretty face. Ah, delicacy from the east, so happy. The widow's sister slightly raised her neck and sat on the ground next to Zhou Luo, with a slightly sweet smell of sweat coming to her. Zhou Luo seized the opportunity to snap another beautiful photo. The shooting skill of the main professional photographer is not just to take a photo casually, but to take a qualified photo. As for what counts as qualified, Zhou Luo doesn't know how to count it, but it feels that the more stunning and less common it is, the easier it is to qualify. He glanced at the system panel and felt that he had touched the door. Extract LV1 48/50. Zhou Luo continued to make pancakes, and the widow's sister ate them slowly and carefully, savoring the delicacies from the east. The atmosphere became harmonious. If there isn't a big man who is so angry that his face turns green and even his muscles are trembling suddenly break in. Come on, master quickly put on the towel. After intensive exercises, you need to pay attention to keep warm, otherwise it will easily cause problems if the cold enters the body. When he heard the sound of Captain America's footsteps, Zhou Luo personally wrapped the large bath towel that had been prepared on the widow's sister's body. Joke. The widow's sister is so beautiful at this time, but it can't be cheaper. Captain America's eyes. Black Widow nodded indifferently, and obediently let him wrap himself tightly. Then, hey, with a loud noise, the angry Captain America kicked over the gate of the training ground and strode in. Natasha Romanoff, is this what you said about training by the sea? Seeing that his shield was covered with oil stains, Captain America got out of anger and roared at Black Widow. The widow's sister raised her head and winked at Zhou Luo. Boy, you came up with the trick, now you can solve it by yourself. Caca. Captain America's fingers clicked, and he looked at Zhou Luo and said, Boy, I told you that if you steal my shield again, I will hit you all over the floor. Facing Captain America, whose fingers creaked, Zhou Luo didn't panic at all. He handed the prepared pancake fruit to the widow's sister, and said with a smile, Mr. Steve, do you know how to control you as quickly as possible? Because you sleep for a long time, you lose control like a wild horse. Captain America frowned slightly and asked subconsciously, do you have any idea? I woke up from a deep sleep for decades, and I was out of touch with the world. It happened that I couldn't control my body normally because I was asleep for too long. I would often encounter accidental damage to things, or even hurt people. This makes Mr. Steve, who is eager to understand the current situation and continue to contribute to the United States, very distressed. And now, someone told him that he can quickly help him complete a transformation that even the most advanced technology of S.H.I.E.L.D. can't complete. Captain America temporarily put aside the shield being used as a pancake pan. Zhou Luo stood up with a grin, pushed over what he used to cut vegetables, and picked up a kitchen knife and a piece of tofu that had been prepared a long time ago. Mr. Steve, there is a very effective way of training strength control in our East, such as this. As he said, he picked up the lactone tofu he bought in the United States supermarket in one hand, and in the other he picked up a sharp kitchen knife and cut it skillfully. A slight breeze sounded, the light of the knife flickered, and in Captain America's surprised eyes, he cut this piece of tofu vertically. At the bottom of the tofu, there was a piece of about 1 millimeter thick and an extremely uniform base that was not cut. Zhou Luo walked to Captain America and displayed his finished product. Look at Mr. Steve, I use the fastest speed to cut this kind of tofu into filaments without letting them fall apart. This is the ultimate performance of power control ability. As long as you follow the training method I helped you develop, you can definitely quickly master the power you can't control. Quote. Captain America looked at the shredded tofu carefully, and even flicked it into his mouth with his fingers, confirming that it was indeed tofu. There was a look of surprise on his face. Is this ***** kung fu? Zhou Luo shook his head pretendingly, and said, no, this is just the basics, and many people can do it. Captain America believed it. At this moment, he forgot his purpose, and just wanted to recover as soon as possible the body that he had lost control of because of ice for decades. After all, this feeling is very bad. So, what is your training plan? Captain America looked up, his eyes full of desire. Zhou Luo was overjoyed in his heart. He pushed the vegetable cutting table over, pointed to the big bag of potatoes that had been washed next to the cutting board, and said, your control capability is too bad, so we will start from the most basic. Here is a bag of potatoes. The goal of our training at the beginning is to cut the potatoes into even filaments. Depending on your current state, potato shreds can be cut a bit larger, probably so thick. Quote. Joe Luo randomly drew out a toothpick and gestured towards Captain America. Captain America took the toothpick and said confidently, "Don't worry, I will finish it soon." Joe Luo grinned and sneered silently. Taking the shield's Sound Yen, a qualified trick is not so easy to practice. He patted Captain America's tight tendon and encouraged, "Mr. Steve, come on, you can." Captain America laughed. "Haha. Don't worry, I definitely can." Then, because the shield was stolen, the widow sister and Joe Luo put together another one. Mr. Steve, who was coming to find the place, completely forgot about this matter. He began to study with a toothpick, then picked up the kitchen knife awkwardly, and started his long journey of cutting potato shreds. Ding! After the host's efforts, Captain America was successfully fooled and started a lifelong hobby, cutting vegetables. Steve Rogers, Captain America, chopping dumpling LV1/05. Hey! Unexpectedly, a temporary flash of light would make Captain America discover his lifelong hobby. This wave is good. Joe Luo plucked his nose, indicating that this wave of blood has been profitable. On the side, the widow sister who had witnessed all this put one hand on her forehead, full of love. This is your teammate. That's too stupid. After being fooled by the fool Joe Luo, you can't find north at all. Joe, you should actually be a diplomat, or a lawyer, or a government spokesperson. The widow sister sighed quietly. Joe Luo sat next to her and said with a smile, "But you are not there in those places." The widow sister turned her head and asked with a smile, "Boy, is this a confession?" Joe Luo shrugged. "Who knows, you think it is, but you think it is not." The widow sister was silent, not knowing what was thinking in her heart. Joe Luo's eyes flickered, and he raised the camera to the stiff bowed waist, awkwardly holding a knife to cut out the thick potato chips. Captain America to take pictures. Hey, this is a rare material. Click. Captain America cuts potato chips and cut them into potato pieces. 49/50. Click. Captain America used too much force and suddenly cut the kitchen knife into the cutting board. 50/50. Ding. Your extraction skills can be upgraded. Would you like to upgrade immediately? Upgrade. Waited for a long time and finally waited till today. Ding. The extraction skill is upgraded to LV2. Before the next upgrade, you still need to take 100 qualified photos. Among the cold system prompts, Joe Luo's eyes shined brightly, and he selected a beautiful photo of the widow sister from the camera. Ding. Extract character Black Widow skill attributes. It is recommended to extract combat skills. Joe Luo did not have hesitation and chose the fighting skills of the widow sister. Compared to other attributes, widow sister's melee ability is absolutely superior to other attributes. Ding. Extract Black Widow combat skills and get 20% Black Widow combat ability. Automatically focus on the use of firearms. The host gains firearm specialization, the current level of master. Among the system prompts, countless mysteries about the use of firearms circulated in his mind. In just an instant, Joe Luo mastered the use of various the United States standard firearms and many shield special weapons. In addition, he also felt that his physical coordination was further enhanced, and the kind of tofu that had just been cut was completely sprinkled with water. Tasting the sweetness, Joe Luo called up a picture of Captain America. Ding. Extract character Captain America skill attributes. It is recommended to extract combat skills. Fighting skills again. Joe Luo frowned slightly, but still chose to extract. Captain America and the Widow Sister's combat skill branches are not the same. The Widow Sister is very balanced in all aspects, whether it is melee combat or long-range guns are very powerful, while Captain America is a complete tank. Ding. Extract Captain America combat skills and obtain Captain America 20% combat ability. Automatically focus on melee combat awareness, and the host gains top combat awareness. Accompanied by the sound of cold machinery in his ears, Joe Luo felt that his muscles had become more active, and there was a strange feeling that flies and insects could not fall off their bodies. It seems that his fighting intuition has penetrated into his bones. Kaka. He squeezed his fists and stood up, and his bones suddenly burst. His muscles were moving, and his eyes were brilliant. On the side, a look of astonishment flashed across the face of the widow who was eating pancake fruit, and she asked in surprise, "Joe, how did you do it? Why do I feel that your physical coordination has suddenly increased so much?" Joe Luo smiled complacently, and flicked, "Master, this is a special skill that belongs to our own people. We call it epiphany. That is, in a very short period of time, there have been leaps and bounds in a certain skill." Quote. The widow's sister was a bit at a loss. Obviously, with her way of thinking, she couldn't understand the epiphany in his mouth. However, looking at the rhythm of his body muscles, there is still that kind of obvious change of temperament. The widow's sister was very sure again. Joe Luo was right under her nose, and suddenly completed what he called an epiphany, and the control of the whole body became more precise. On the side, Captain America, who was cutting potatoes, also felt his change, and immediately threw down the kitchen knife, yelling, "Joe! Are you fooling me, right? I want to follow your so-called epiphany." Joe Luo grinned and smiled triumphantly. "Sorry, Mr. Steve, this kind of epiphany is unique to our Chinese culture. If you want to learn this skill, you must be familiar with ancient Chinese classics. Like the Book of Changes, the 8 diagrams of the King of Wen, the Tao Te Ching and so on. And this kind of classics, even if they are in, only a few people can read them." Quote. Anyway, there are no other Washa people here. It is not too simple to use Washa's extensive ancient culture to fool 2 people from the United States. Hearing him say this, Captain America was frustrated for a while. "God, I don't even know Washa's words." Joe Luo patted him on the shoulder and said, "Mr. Steve, there is an old saying called diligence to make up for one's weakness. Although your ability is insufficient, you can achieve this effect through hard work. And the direction of your efforts is to become a qualified trick first." Quote. Dunzi. What is Dunzi? Captain America is curious. Joe Luo said unpredictably, "This is a kind of level of practice, just like the black belt and blue belt in Taekwondo." Captain America understood it and nodded. "Well then, I will continue to learn how to cut potatoes." After speaking, he turned around again and concentrating on cutting up the potatoes. Joe Luo cleaned the thick-fingered potato chips he had just cut out, and said to the greasy widow sister who was eating, "Master, today I will make you a very famous snack in China. Spiked potatoes." Quote. Suddenly, the widow sister became interested again. She supported her cheeks with her hands and sat on the ground watching Joe Luo pour vegetable oil into Captain America's shield, then put the potato strips in and started frying. After watching for a while, the widow's sister was a little uninterested. "Hey, isn't this just French fries? I don't eat this kind of garbage." Joe Luo did not speak, and concentrated on making spiked potatoes. Soon, the potatoes were fried, and the seasoning was mixed with a strong fragrance. Joe Luo put the prepared potatoes on a plate and handed it to the widow's sister. Just after smelling it, the widow's sister couldn't help narrowing her eyes and exclaiming, "Hey, it smells so good." The law of truth that can't be evaded is vividly reflected in the widow's body. Tuck 2-2. Captain America was working hard to cut potato shreds, and Joe Luo finally fed the widow's sister. "Joe, you are amazing." The widow's sister leaned on the exercise blanket, her face flushed and her eyes were like water. Joe Luo also raised his thumb and said, "Master, you are great too. You are the first Westerner I have ever met who can eat spicy food." The widow's sister smiled complacently, her scarlet head scrolled slightly, and an air of confusion filled her. "Grandmas, the widow's sister is really a stunner." Joe Luo smacked his lips and turned around to clean up the pot of Captain America. "Hey, the dagger can't hide anymore." After tidying up, he washed the Captain America's burnt and changed color pot and returned it to him. Joe Luo glanced at the time and said, "Mr. Steve, it's getting late. You can take these potatoes back and slice them slowly. If it is not enough, then you can ask the logistics department to prepare more for you. Now I give you a task to cut 50 potatoes into qualified potato shreds in 30 minutes in 3 days." Quote. Captain America took its shield, looked at the paint that had been completely changed in color by the alcohol stove, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He wanted to get angry. But facing the sincere expression of Joe Luo, he has no way to vent at all. This kid taught himself how to strengthen his control. As long as you can retrieve your control during the peak period as soon as possible, this matter, forget it. Boy, don't come and steal my shield in the future. With a word of caution, Captain America depressed carrying an unrecognizable shield and half a bag of potatoes, and left the private training ground of Black Widow. Joe Luo packed up, and with the camera on his back, he called roar to Black Widow and left the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. If there is nothing to steal the shield, then steal again when something happens. On the streets of Washington, Joe Luo drove a sports car and put on a phone call. Hey, Tony, is there any entertainment tonight? On the opposite side of the phone, Tony Stark, a famous American rich and handsome man, shook a glass of champagne gently, and said in an accented voice like a poem, Joe. My dear friend, I am in Washington now. I am interested in coming out and playing. There are so many beauties here. Joe Luo raised his eyebrows, but Tony came to Washington. Listening to the sound inside, it seems to be having a pool party. That's interesting. Tony, tell me where you are, I'll be there soon. Okay, JARVIS, send the position to Joe. Soon, a location appeared on Joe Luo's phone. Crunchy. Amid the violent friction, the roaring blue sports car rushed out like a ghost, leaving a pungent burnt smell. 10 minutes later, his car parked in a large villa by the shore of Washington. Before I walked in, I heard chuckles of silver bell-like laughter coming from inside. Joe Luo got out of the car and threw the key to the doorman. Then he entered the villa unhurriedly and walked towards the open-air swimming pool above. Entering here, except for the man Tony Stark, all the beauties in swimsuits. White people, yellow people, black people, everything. And each of them has a fiery figure and looks different, at least there are still many that are in line with Joe Luo's aesthetics. Hey, Joe, I've been waiting for you here for a long time. Tony Stark wore swimming trunks, bathrobes, and brown-toed mirrors, exaggeratingly trying to give Joe Luo a hug. Joe Luo casually picked up a champagne bottle from the waiter's tray and pressed it to his chest. Come on, please wipe off the lipstick mark on your body before you lie next time. Tony smiled awkwardly and waved his hand. Okay, I admit that I have just had an in-depth and profound exchange with the two beautiful black pearls on the genetic structure of the black and white race. Joe Luo frowned in disgust. You have a good appetite. Tony laughed, holding his shoulder with one hand, pointing to the beauties in swimsuits in the swimming pool, and said triumphantly, Joe. You saved my life as my best brother. There are all kinds of beauties here. Everything is available. I can help you get chuang for anyone you are interested in. Joe Luo sighed and asked, do you only have this kind of stuff? Although there are many beauties attending the pool party, many of them are more in line with his aesthetics, but he estimated that most of the women here have super friendship with the Tony. Let him take it. Non-existent. Don't you have some women who are more in line with the Oriental aesthetics to introduce to me? If not, then you should not always show off in front of me how many bed partners you have changed in a day. Joe Luo's face was contemptuous, which made Tony Stark's face all green. As a famous playboy throughout the United States, how could he be so underestimated? Okay, I really have a beauty who fits your Oriental, virgin complex to introduce to you. But, she is not so easy to handle. Tony Stark drank the champagne in one fell swoop. Wait for 2 minutes. 5 minutes later, Tony Stark got in Joe Luo's co-pilot. Joe Luo slammed his seat belt. Tony, my co-pilot has never let a man sit. You are the first. If the girl you introduced to me tonight makes me unsatisfied, then you are dead. Quote. Tony Stark said with a weird smile, you will be satisfied. This is a loyal and pure believer, and at the same time a stubborn astrophysicist, and his looks and body will definitely satisfy you. Joe Luo raised his eyebrows slightly and started the car ejection. The car turned into a blue lightning in a piercing sound. Then you just leave. What about those girls? Tony Stark said indifferently. It doesn't matter, free food, free champagne, free luxury suites, everything is free. For these easy girls, these things are enough. Quote. Joe Luo's eyes lit up, and a ghost idea flashed in his heart. Hey Tony, what do you think of your bodyguards? Tony was confused by his jumping thinking. After a while, he looked back at the cars behind him and said, oh, they are very nice and dedicated. The corner of Joe Luo's mouth was raised slightly, revealing a smile that looked like a demon with tiger teeth. He stopped the car abruptly and turned his head and said seriously, Tony, I think you should reward these dedicated bodyguards, and prizes. What do you think of those easy girls? Tony Stark blinked blankly, before regaining his senses, shook his head and laughed. Hey. Don't you just hate being followed? But these guys are indeed worthy of reward, just like you said. Let them enjoy it. After finishing speaking, he got out of the car directly, walked to the back of the bodyguard cars, and communicated with his bodyguards. Looking at Tony Stark in the rearview mirror, Joe Luo's face is full of weirdness. Grandmas. The Europeans and Americans can let go. Among those easy girls, at least half of them have crossed the line with Tony. As a result, our Mr. Iron Man started pimping so generously and blessed his bodyguards. Great. Joe Luo sighed quietly. Sudden. Ding. After the host's efforts, Iron Man was successfully fooled and started a lifelong hobby, the pimp. Tony Stark Iron Man Pimp LV1 0/5. In the screen, Tony Stark's lifelong hobby experience value is skyrocketing. In the end, when he returned to the car, the experience value was fixed at 11/5. Grandmas. I am so silly. Real. It turns out that Stark's hidden hobby is pimping other people. Then I should have fooled him into doing this earlier. Ding. Tony Stark Pimp can upgrade. Do you want to upgrade right away? In the cold tone, Tony Stark also opened the car door and sat in. Joe Luo didn't have the slightest hesitation, so he chose to upgrade. Ding. Tony Tower upgrade to Pimp LV2, Mood Pleasure plus 20%, Personal Charm plus 10%, Physical Fitness plus 10%, Intelligence plus 5%, the next upgrade experience is 6/10. Ding. The host has the second student upgraded to LV2, with all attributes plus 30%. Amid the icy beep, Joe Luo felt a heat flow in his body again, and then quickly swept through his limbs. His all attributes have been improved again. Now, I should be able to beat the Widow Sister, right? Joe Luo probably felt it, and felt that now his comprehensive combat effectiveness should be at least the same as that of the Widow Sister and Captain America. On the side, when Tony Stark got in the car, he suddenly felt that he was in a very good mood, and a warm current swept through his body, making him feel that the feeling of being hollowed out was immediately filled. Suddenly, this feeling aroused him comfortably. Aside, Joe Luo, who had recovered from his senses, started the car and smiled slyly. How about it? Do you feel comfortable, and even your body has become stronger? Tony Stark raised his head and said in surprise, it's really like this. Joe Luo flicked. Tony, there is an old saying in China, that happiness alone is not as good as others. It means that if you don't need it very much, you can share it with friends around you. Enjoy it with your subordinates, and you will also get happiness and benefits. Do you think this sentence makes sense? Quote. Tony Stark thought for a while, and felt that it was indeed the truth. For example, those easy girls, who can't play by themselves, share a few for their bodyguards to play with. The bodyguard was grateful and happy, not to mention those easy girls. The best of both worlds. Joe, you are really a philosopher from the East. Tony Stark sighed. If I knew you earlier and learned this, I wouldn't fall into depression and go to the ghost place of Fox for vacation, let alone encounter any disgusting beasts. Fortunately, brother, you came in time. Not only did you save me, you also shared this truth with me. Thank you so much. Quote. Grandmas. The thinking of Westerners is completely different. If it's in girls, maybe I and Stark will do it directly. Stark sat in the co-pilot and gave directions. Joe Luo drove through the streets, then stopped in front of a wooden house in the suburbs. Arrive. Stark called Roar to get out of the car, and Joe Luo also got out of the car. The sound of the car also alarmed the people in the wooden house. A beautiful brown-haired woman and a beautiful black-haired white woman walked out of the wooden house. Mr. Stark, the brown-haired beauty frowned and asked, I won't go to your party. Daisy won't go to your pool party. Even if I give up the experimental support of Stark Industries Group, I still won't do anything. Change. Stark waved his hand and said, No, I'm not here to invite you to a party. But the chief consultant of our Stark Industry Group is also my best friend. Joe from China is very interested in your research, so I can barely accompany him to meet you, a great astrophysicist. Quote. Stark's voice was undulated, his body language was very rich, and then he turned his head and said to Joe Luo, Joe. This is what I told you about. Joe Luo waved his hand to interrupt him, and said, Ms. Jane Foster, the famous astrophysicist, is like a thunderous ear. Your theory on wormholes and space-jumping technology is an eye-opener for me. He shook off Stark, strode directly to the beautiful brown-haired woman, and put out his hand. Hello, Miss Foster, I am Joe Luo from China. I am a gourmet. I don't know if there is a style to invite you to dinner with your assistant. Definitely, I also want to learn more about the application prospects of wormhole and space-jumping technology theories. Quote, the beautiful brown-haired woman who was a little overwhelmed by his enthusiasm is the future Thor's girlfriend, astrophysicist Jane Foster. The black-haired beauty next to her is her assistant Daisy Louise. Prying Thor's corner, actually quite interesting. Jane Foster was overwhelmed by Joe Luo's enthusiasm. She subconsciously shook hands with him, stroked her hair to refuse. But Daisy Louise next to her reminded her, Jane, if we can't get the sponsorship, the experiment will be forced to stop. Jane Foster glanced at Tony Stark, who was speechless leaning on the side of the car, and then at Joe Luo, who looked harmless to humans and animals and looked like a high school student, and thought Joe Luo was better off. Mr. Joe, I want to confirm one thing first. After a pause, she asked, can you be the master and provide support for my experiment? On the side, Stark said directly, Miss Foster, Joe can be the master. I will unconditionally support investments below $10 billion US. Suddenly, Joe Luo gave Stark a thumbs up secretly. Hemp egg, too local tyrant, open mouth as tens of billions. Stark raised his eyebrows and made an unceremonious gesture. Completed a wave of secret exchanges. After receiving the affirmative reply from Stark personally, Jane Foster breathed a sigh of relief and said, then thank you Mr. Joe for the invitation. Joe Luo glanced at Stark and asked the fake model falsely, Tony, do you want to be together? Stark lacked interest and shook his head. You know, I have never been interested in this kind of non-professional stuff. I'd better go back and study the thing you mentioned to me before. After speaking, he got into the car and started. I drove your car away, you find a solution by yourself. Joe Luo waved his hand and shouted, this is my baby, don't break it, otherwise don't blame me for raising a dog in your free city. The engine roared, and Stark's roar came. For God's sake, don't mention dog creatures to me. Joe Luo shrugged and said to Jane Foster, who didn't know why, Stark was humiliated by dogs with excrement when he was a child, so you should understand what this humiliation means to him. In order to pry Thor into the corner, Joe Luo didn't mind stepping on Tony Stark. Jane Foster covered her mouth and chuckled, you are so humorous. Joe Luo said, now my car has been driven away by the evil capitalist. I wonder if I will be lucky enough to take Miss Foster's car and find a quiet place to explore the mysteries of the universe and space. Jane Foster did not refuse and asked Daisy to drive. Then, the three of them drove Foster's small Ford to a Chinese restaurant not far away. Tisk, it seems Foster Cutie still knows how to take care of people. Joe Luo smacked his lips, tasting the local dishes that were not very authentic, and chatted with Foster without a word. Because he is more familiar with the general structure of the Marvel Universe, sometimes his casual two words make Foster and Daisy feel unpredictable. Come down for a meal. Jane Foster and her assistant Daisy have regarded Joe Luo as a young astronomer, and they trust him. Miss Foster, we are very happy tonight. The research support you need will be provided by Stark Industries. As for the research funding, you don't need to worry about it. As long as it is normally needed, I will help you handle it. Quote. Joe Luo is holding a ticket. Anyway, Stark Industrial Group does have plans in this regard. After receiving the promise, Jane Foster's drunk face showed a touch of gratitude. Mr. Joe, why don't I send you off at this late hour? Joe Luo shook his head and said, thank you, but I dare not take your car in your current state. Jane Foster smiled awkwardly, exchanged a few words with Joe Luo, and watched him get in a taxi before leaving. After getting in the taxi, Joe Luo's slightly drowsy face became sober. He tapped his eyebrows and said, thank you, go to No. 72 Sangli Avenue. The taxi rushed right and left in the traffic, and the surrounding neon kept retreating. Joe Luo took out his cell phone and dialed Stark's number. Hello, my friend, have you gotten that female scientist? Stark's chuckle came, somewhat intermittently. Zhou Luo frowned and asked, "Where are you now?" Stark's voice came, "I'm on the plane now, and tomorrow I'm going to Afen to show off the latest achievements of Stark Industries. So sorry my friend, when I come back from there, I will definitely bring you a Middle Eastern girl back." Quote. Afen. Zhou Luo raised his eyebrows. So, is the plot finally about to begin? Tony, that place in the Middle East is not safe, you have to be careful. Zhou Luo reminded slightly. Stark was taken aback for a moment, and laughed. "Don't worry, who am I? I'm the boss of Stark Industries, they will protect me." "I hope so, I wish you well. And don't forget to bring me a Middle Eastern girl back, but remember to lift their veil first to help me see if it's pretty. I don't like a mouth that is too big, it's not tight enough. To you, you know." Zhou Luo broke off for a while. Stark laughed wildly. There are so many demands, even the top and bottom are tight. "Don't worry, I have absolutely no problem doing things. I will definitely help you find 2 Middle Eastern girls who fit the Oriental aesthetic." Quote. The two laughed and teased a few more words before hanging up the phone. Holding the mobile phone in his hand, Zhou Luo calculated for a while, feeling that under his own intervention, Stark, who is already working on small reactor technology, will definitely increase the survival probability a lot. He relaxes. Iron Man. It will appear soon. Zhou Luo roar let out a sigh of relief. Sudden. Zitza. The harsh brake sound rang, and the taxi stopped in the middle of a small alley with the driver's crazy curse. "I hit someone." The driver's mouth trembled and his face turned blue. Just now, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the car, making him subconsciously slam on the brakes. But now, the figure is gone. The driver unfastened his seatbelt and prepared to get out of the car. Sudden. A faint voice sounded from the co-pilot. "Uncle, are you looking for me?" The driver looked back, but saw no one. "Uncle, I'm here." There was another voice on his right. The driver turned his head to the right. Boom. With a soft sound, a ghostly figure stepped on the hood of the taxi. The moment the driver looked up, the figure disappeared again. Roar. A cold front blows, and the driver is scared to pee. Gee, host. Amid the screams, the black driver opened the door and disappeared into the corner of the alley. Roar. The breeze was blowing, and the figure suddenly appeared in the back seat of the car, with a hand on Zhou Luo's shoulder. "Hi, long time no see, dear Zhou, have you changed girlfriend again? It's a bit crappy Chinese, but I can hear it clearly anyway." Zhou Luo sighed and said, "Miss Fang, can you not engage in such a big battle every time you show up?" He tilted his head, a typical delicate and pretty face with Oriental classical charm imprinted in his eyes. "Her name is Clarice Fang, a Chinese girl who was adopted by Sabretooth, aka Blink. When I was with me, I used to call them Xiao Xing, now the newcomer is better than the old, I call them Miss Fang." The flashing tone seemed very resentful, like a deep-seated woman. Zhou Luo's mouth twitched slightly. "Injustice. I didn't expect to be found by her so quickly." Zhou Luo is actually a little bit guilty about mutant who is both good and evil, especially mutant who is not very friendly to non-mutants. It's just that Black Widow was brought to Washington at the beginning. When I joined S.H.I.E.L.D., there was nowhere to put my heart. I happened to meet the Chinese mutant Shining, and she was 70% to 80% similar to a female celebrity in her previous life. This natural attraction made her one of Zhou Luo's friends. Then a man and a woman, and the villager saw that the villager had tears in his eyes, and it was natural for him to have normal feelings. Then, because of some things, he chose to alienate this fellow. Now, everyone is here, what can I do? Xiao Xing, you know, I'm protecting you. Zhou Luo flickered half true and half false. The flashing face suddenly became hideous, the whole person disappeared in an instant, and when he reappeared, he was already sitting on Zhou Luo's lap. "Then you can't leave suddenly. Also, who is the woman eating with you tonight?" Thinking really jumps. Miss Foster is an astrophysicist, and you know that I am a high-level consultant of Stark Industries Group. Stark Group is going to invest in this scientist, so I came to contact her. Zhou Luo spread his hands, and then said solemnly, "Also, you also took advantage of me to leave Fox and stay away from Bella. Why should you be so hostile to a woman you met for the first time?" Blinking blankly, I recalled the familiar process between myself and Zhou Luo, and found that it seemed to be the case. It seems that he has always been active, and Zhou Luo also said that he has a little girlfriend in the so-called fox. Suddenly, Flickering shuddered slightly, and a touch of shyness appeared on his face. Appeared together, glittering and biting her lower lip. Then I have to choose myself. Flashing said a little, then hugged Zhou Luo, flashing green light all over his body and disappeared into the car for an instant. Next second, they appeared in the apartment at 72 Sangli Avenue. Ding! After the host's efforts, the flashing was successfully fooled, and a lifelong hobby, fashion model. Clarice Fang, flashing, fashion model LV1, 0/5. Zhou Luo held the camera in one hand, and said with a smile on his face that was almost uncontrollable, don't worry, go and put on your favorite clothes first. 2 minutes later, the door opened, and she was wearing a close-fitting leather jacket. One hand was resting on the door frame, and the other was holding a handbag and blinking at Zhou Luo. Inside the bag, there are all kinds of clothes. Mr. Photographer, is this all right? Zhou Luo grinned and waved. Okay, follow me. Afterwards, the two people walked into the professionally arranged studio one after another. Then, start taking pictures. My ambition is to be a great photographer. Click, come, change a posture, right, cocked, to the end. The symphony agitated in the studio, and the click of the camera still sounded from time to time. Yes, this posture is very beautiful, ups and downs like a horse, it must be photographed. Oye, as a professional photographer, Zhou Luo will never let go of the moment of keeping beauty. After a few hours, the flicker was soft as mud, and he sipped slightly in Zhou Luo's arms. And Zhou Luo is flipping through the photos in the camera and admiring his perfect masterpiece. Gee, this one is good, with white stars on his face. Hey, this one is also good to look back. He. Zhou Luo grinned, and then opened the system panel. Super God Photographer System. Host, Zhou Luo. Main profession, photographer recording beautiful moments, and extracting ability from photos. Main skills. 1. Photography. Record beautiful moments and freeze frames. The qualified photos taken can increase the experience value of extraction skills. 2. Extract LV2 19/100ths. A skill or attribute of the corresponding character can be extracted from the taken photos, and the current ability completeness is 20%. Deputy occupation. Life mentor. Guide those who only know how to fight and kill lost lambs, develop their lifelong hobbies. Student. 1. Natasha Romanoff Black Widow, Foodie LV2, 1/10. 2. Steve Rogers, Captain America, Dunsey LV1, 0/5. 3. Tony Stark, Iron Man, Pimp LV2, 7/10. 4. Clarice Fang, Flashing, Sunny Fun Model LV1, 18/5 can be upgraded. Looking at the system panel, Zhou Luo nodded in satisfaction. It's still flickering. Not only let the anger accumulated in the widow sister be fully bloomed, but also finally activated the lifelong hobby and promoted 2 levels in a row. Ding! Flashing lifelong hobby fashion model can be upgraded. May I upgrade immediately? Upgrade. Ding! The flash upgrade is fashion model LV3, face value plus 10%, figure plus 10%, charm plus 20%, physical fitness plus 20%, super ability power plus 10%, the next upgrade experience is 3/15. Quote. Ding! The host has the first student upgraded to LV3, with all attributes plus 60%. In the voice of the cold machine, the flashing body shape and facial features have all begun to make subtle adjustments, becoming more coordinated and perfect. At the same time, a warm current rose from her body, which swept away her fatigue. And Zhou Luo also felt that a mysterious power had risen in his body again, and his physical fitness had improved a lot in an instant. Now, he was completely confident that he suppressed the widow sister in close combat. Am I a teacher? Zhou Luo rubbed his chin, then shook his head. Joke. The widow sister has a lot of skills, how can she get out of the teacher so quickly? Turning off the system panel, Zhou Luo began to extract the flashing skills. Ding! Extract character flashing skills. It is recommended to extract self-teleport. Blink is a mutant, and teleportation is her skill. Her teleportation skills can not only teleport herself, but also others or items. Ding! Extract the flashing teleport skills. Get 20% teleport ability. Automatically focus on self-teleport. The host acquires skills. Teleport range within 1000 meters. With the sound reverberating in his ears, Zhou Luo felt that there seemed to be a set of genetic codes in his body, which made him discover that he has the ability to travel through space. Teleport. This skill is good, life-saving max. Zhou, you are amazing. Slowly, blinking and opening his eyes, the green pupils are full of blurry colors. Zhou Luo smiled, raised the camera in his hand, and said, Xiao Xing, would you like to share my work? As a professional model, these photos are also her own works. So, you have to take a look. She lay on Zhou Luo's lap, took the camera and began to flip through it. Slowly, as the scenes of Zhou Luo entering the mirror appeared, she began to heat up quickly again. Xiao Xing, are you helping me warm up food? Zhou Luo teased. The blinking lifted his eyelids, the green pupils were like emeralds, shining charmingly. Sir, do you need dessert? I have powder abalone with tomato sauce and cheese. Hey, have you even learned Washa's jokes? Zhou Luo looked up. But I want to treat you to candy first. Recently, the flicker of China's internet culture has been countered. Then, when Zhou Luo woke up the next day, he saw a note left by the flashing. She is in a hurry and needs to leave Washington temporarily. Zhou Luo frowned, recalled what he knew, and felt relieved that the flashing would not cause trouble. After all, flashing skills are definitely the first escape. At this moment, the mobile phone placed on the head of the Chuang rang, and Zhou Luo's face changed slightly when he picked it up. Grandma's phone is from the widow's sister. He hurriedly connected, and the widow's sister on the other side yelled angrily, Zhou Luo. Where are you dead again? Come to the headquarters quickly, there is a task. Okay, I'll be there soon. Zhou Luo hung up the phone, dressed quickly, and rushed out of the house. I took a taxi, went outside the SHIELD headquarters, and entered the interior of SHIELD through a grocery store. Soon, he came to the meeting room. In the conference room, SHIELD Director Nick Fury, Agent Phil Coulson, Black Widow, Captain America and others have already sat down. Sit down. Zhou Luo was pulled down by the widow's sister and frowned slightly. It seems that what happened was not easy to handle, so I asked myself to come. Zhou, Tony Stark, you should be familiar with it. Nick Fury knocked on the table and said, he was kidnapped in Afghan, it is very dangerous and isolated. If our agent passes, it may suffer heavy losses. Quote. Zhou Luo continued. So, do you need my Suicide Squad to appear? Suicide Squad. This is the team that Zhou Luo proposed to form after he met the legendary Joker after he joined S.H.I.E.L.D. when he visited the prison of S.H.I.E.L.D. Naturally, he became the leader of this team. Nick Fury nodded and said, you know, our agent is precious, and every Suicide Squad under your hand is a super criminal. It is perfect for them to go to the dangerous Middle East to rescue the dandy Stark. Quote. Besides, you are Tony Stark's best friend. Can you let him be tortured by the kidnappers? Zhou Luo shook his head and said, but Harley Quinzel is not a super criminal, she is just a psychologist. Aside, the widow's sister pouted and said, yes, she is indeed not a super criminal, but don't forget why she joined Suicide Squad voluntarily, and it's not because you play with other people's feelings that people can only use this method to get your attention. Zhou Luo blinked and shrugged. All right. Who makes me handsome and charming? But I rejected her not for anything else, but to save her. After all, her red-haired girlfriend also likes herself, and her temper is very grumpy. Okay, since S.H.I.E.L.D. can't figure it out, I can only do it myself. Zhou Luo did not forget to take advantage of it. Nick Fury shook his head helplessly and said, this time the Suicide Squad is dispatched. One purpose is to rescue the Playboy Stark. Another purpose is naturally to test the combat effectiveness of the team you are responsible for. If they can't produce results that satisfy me, there is no need for them to exist. Quote. As he talked, Nick Fury became murderous, and the power of a high-ranking person swept away. Zhou Luo curled his lips and waved his hand. Director, you are so old, don't be so murderous every day. By the way, how is the little turtle I gave you? Quote. Speaking of the little tortoise, several people in the meeting room began to smirk. Nick Fury's face turned dark, and he snorted, asshole. You are ashamed to say. Do you know, that perverted turtle has 3 companions? You know how much energy we spent in order to hide the location of the turtle. How many resources are there? Are you embarrassed to ask how the tortoise is raised? The director is very rough. Joe Luo shivered with laughter. Wow, very scary. But Chief, this is hard-won research material. Nick Fury Roar let out a sigh of relief and calmed down again. Otherwise, do you think you can still stand here so completely? Also, in order to disturb the sight of the other 3 turtles, we have secretly released the news that the disappearance of the turtle may be related to you. After all, it was you who went to the Sun Country. Go get it back. Oh my Nima. Boom. Joe Luo rose to the scene and shouted angrily, Director, how can you let me take the blame? In the next second, he said righteously, my car was driven away by the Stark. Unless you immediately equip me with a cool tank, I will immediately go to the black market to release the news and say that a tortoise is raised on the ground floor of your villa. God, this guy is not my apprentice. The widow's sister supported her forehead with one hand, with a look of despair on her face. It's so embarrassing. On the side, Captain America and Phil Coulson were flushed with constipation. Hey, this guy is absolutely lawless, and even the chief dared to threaten. As the person involved, Nick Fury had a blue brain. He was pretty sure that if he didn't meet the fool's requirements, he might really do this kind of thing. This guy, but famously unorganized and undisciplined, didn't have much awe. On the contrary, ability is outstanding, and there is the support of the veteran of S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Widow. Never mind, not as knowledgeable as a child. Nick Fury used AQ's spirit to find himself a step down, waved and said, Phil Coulson, take him to the garage to choose a car. Oye, nailed it. Joe Luo stood up and said, the director can rest assured that Stark is my best friend. I will definitely not let him have an accident. Phil Coulson was indifferent and muttered, but your best friend is not as good as a car of your choice. If I told Stark about this. Joe Luo turned his head and said with a smile, Phil Coulson, have you forgotten what you owe me? Phil Coulson raised his head and stared at the ceiling, as if there was a beautiful woman taking a shower on it. Joe Luo kicked him, there is no woman you like on it, but there is a car I like in the garage. Take me to choose a car. Phil Coulson sighed silently, adjusted his cuffs, and walked straight out the door. When the two of them left, Nick Fury looked at him and said, well, now I have seen people, Joe, this fool has indeed suddenly become much stronger. But our monitoring equipment did not find anything that changed him, let alone find this substance, so he is safe now. Quote. The widow's sister Roar let out a sigh of relief. There are no exceptions. This incident happened under the noses of Steve and me. The process of Joe Luo's change was very abrupt and rapid, but I believe that he has absolutely nothing to do with other organizations. The widow's sister said sternly. On the side, Captain America patted his shield and said silently, if this guy is involved with other organizations, he would definitely not dare to be so high profile. Nick Fury nodded, stood up, and said, well, this time Joe is responsible for the rescue of Stark. The big guy we have been monitoring seems to be in trouble recently. You and Natasha Romanoff will go and watch him first. The destructive power is too strong. As for Steve, you continue to cut the potatoes. Joe's method is indeed more effective. Don't worry, S.H.I.E.L.D. has sufficient funds, even if you cut 100-year-old potatoes, it doesn't matter. Quote. After joking Captain America, Nick Fury picked up the file and left the meeting room first. Captain America smiled bitterly and said, Natasha Romanoff, I'm sorry I can't help you this time. Black Widow Tsunere smiled and shook his head. You can regain absolute control of the body as soon as possible, even if it is a great help to me. After speaking, Captain America was left alone in silence. Boom, he fisted angrily on the conference table, leaving a fist mark, and lifted the shield and left. Go back and cut the potatoes. Large-scale auto show. Joe Luo and Phil Coulson walked in the aisle together. Both sides were full of cool, mighty, or very low-key, super high-tech cars. Joe, when can you choose? We are already on the second lap. I still have work to do. Phil Coulson was speechless. Joe Luo snapped his nose. Why, do you want to go back and make coffee for your assistant? Phil Coulson's face turned dark. This fool, didn't he make coffee for the female assistant once and he saw it? Young man, next time you make coffee, remember not to ask your assistant to go to the bathroom, and the color of the coffee is brown instead of milky white. Ask your assistant to pay attention to his appearance after he finishes his work. It doesn't matter if I see it, I will definitely not talk nonsense based on my character, but it is not good if we have so many other colleagues who have seen it. If it gets in your wife's ears, you're done. Quote, Joe Luo patted Phil Coulson on the shoulder, fascinating and enticing. And Phil Coulson's face gradually turned blue, even a little purple. His fists creaked, his eyes fixed on Joe Luo's face close at hand, and he wanted to throw a punch. This fool. Just because of this incident, how many times have you blackmailed yourself? Ah, I'm going to break out. As a result, Joe Luo shook his head and let go of him and continued to walk forward, making his anger instantly extinguished. Joe Luo sighed while shaking his head as he walked. Why, young people nowadays are so frizzy, and they are not calm at all when things happen. I think back then, I stepped on 3 boats on Fox, while falling in love with Bella, while still marrying the daughters of those 2 monster families. They were discovered and almost shot to pieces. It's really not panic. There is still time to save Stark's misstep. Youth. Look at this guy again, he is still the SHIELD ace agent. What a shame. Joe Luo spit out a few words, then turned around and said, Phil Coulson, I know that our bureau has built a car that can be used for flight. If I don't want this garbage, I want that car. Phil Coulson frowned and said, that thing is a custom-made car for the chief. Joe Luo vomited. Come on, the one-eyed guy is that age. It's enough to drive a special Chevrolet, so cool cars should be used by young people. I have to drive to school in the afternoon to participate in my sister's the parent meeting. Phil Coulson pretended not to hear him, and said, if you insist on that car, I must ask the chief. Joe Luo waved his hand. Please, please. Grandma's bureaucracy. Phil Coulson ignored him and connected Nick Fury with an internal communicator. After a brief communication, Phil Coulson raised his head and said, the director agreed, but the car cannot be handed over to you now. I will give it to you after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What does it mean? Joe Luo smacked his lips and waved his hand. Okay, give one-eyed face. Then, with his hands behind his back, he left the garage with Phil Coulson. Pittsburgh Norlank Prison is a very, very tightly guarded prison. There are not many criminals in it, but every one of them outside is enough to make the United States people chill. Joe Luo jumped from the helicopter and landed happily before entering the prison with his credentials. In the special reception room of the prison, Joe Luo met the members of the Suicide Squad he had formed. Harley Quinzel, a female Joker, a psychologist with a brain circuit different from ordinary people. Rick Flag, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, Succubus, Vengeful Demon, Killer Crocodile, Slipknot. Only, Joker and Katana are missing. Although this guy is very attractive, he is too neurotic and unconstrained, so Joe Luo didn't make him a member of Suicide Squad. Everyone, you have a task. As long as you complete this task, you can get a 3-month parole period, as well as a large bounty and a 2-year sentence reduction. Joe Luo was straightforward and threw the information Nick Fury had given him on the table. Subsequently, the people of Suicide Squad began to circulate among each other. You know the identity of the target. Your mission is to go to Afohan, find him and rescue him. As Joe Luo was talking, he suddenly pointed to Harley Quinzel and said, Harley, you are not allowed to go. The Joker girl stubbornly raised her head, and growled like a wild cat, why? I just want to go. Joe Luo raised his eyelids. Oh, you want to go, so, then go. If he died, I think Pamela would be very happy. Quote. Suddenly, the Joker girl froze. The other members of Suicide Squad are all clinging to their arms and watching the show. Pamela, Joker's girlfriend, who was once a botanist, had the ability to control plants because of her participation in scientific experiments. Poison Ivy. Pamela, I'm not afraid of her. The Joker girl looked up stubbornly again. From this action, I will also become a strong without fear of Pamela. Well, you just have to be happy. Anyway, Poison Ivy is just so-so. Besides, Joe Luo is not a Virgin Mary. He can't stop and won't stop this beautiful girl from liking herself. Naturally, she won't stop her from becoming stronger in order to get closer to herself. All right, SHIELD will provide you with assistance in information, transportation, and logistics materials. Flag, I appoint you as the commander of this operation. You should consider all actions yourself. I only have one request, to bring Tony Stark back alive, otherwise you don't have to continue roar sucking. Suicide Squad, action. Quote. Suicide Squad was equipped with a biological bomb, and reluctantly boarded the transport plane and headed for the Middle East. The Joker girl is also in the team. Jo Luo can refuse her likes, but cannot refuse her determination to become stronger. After eating lunch, he also left Pittsburgh and returned to Washington. Back to the headquarters of SHIELD again, Phil Coulson enthusiastically recruited Roar as soon as he saw him. Hey, Joe, your car is ready. Jo Luo's eyes lit up. He has been eager for the supercar equipped with many black technologies of SHIELD for a long time. This time he grabbed Nick Fury's pigtail and finally got the things in his hands. Walk around, take me to see. 3 minutes later. Standing in the garage, Jo Luo looked up blankly at the old rusty car in front of him. Phil Coulson, did you tell me this is the super cool car I wanted? He pinched Phil Coulson's neck, his eyes were bloodshot. Phil Coulson was still expressionless, his left hand began to adjust the cuffs of his right. Then, throw a fist. Boom. Phil Coulson staggered back, holding his right cheek and gasping. Grandmas, do it with me, and don't see who Lao Su's teacher is. Jo Luo looked up very bullishly, and gestured a middle finger to Phil Coulson. Phil Coulson looked desperate. How did this fool suddenly become so strong? A few days ago, I could even compete with him. Jo Luo gave a weird laugh, shrugged very obscenely, and said with a grin, we in China have a kung fu for collecting yin and replenishing yang, that is, we can absorb the energy of a woman to make ourselves stronger when we have girls. Yesterday I attended Tony's fool's party and fought with more than 20 beauties all night, so now I am no longer who I am. Quote. Ha ha ha. Jo Luo laughed wildly, then opened the door of the classic car and sat in, leaving the corner of Phil Coulson's mouth twitching with hesitation. Does Dongfang really have such a powerful thing? Then should I? Do not. I don't want to give in to this fool. Phil Coulson squeezed his fists, rubbed his sore cheeks, and blocked his chest uncomfortably. Sitting in the car, Jo Luo found that under the exterior of this classic car, there was a luxurious interior hidden. The interior is luxurious, and there are many, many functions in it. Jo Luo finally got a general idea of the performance of this car by comparing the instructions one by one. This thing is completely a prehistoric dinosaur in sheep's clothing. The W12 engine squeezes nearly 1,000 horsepower, and the body is all covered with alloy steel newly developed by SHIELD, and it also carries a sharp weapon system and a flight system. This is exactly a reduced version of the F-22 car. How is it? Satisfied, the director personally decided to change this appearance. Young people should keep a low profile and learn to be grateful. Phil Coulson held on to the car door, with a weird smile drawn to the corner of his mouth. The secretary is too black. Knowing that this Joe wanted to pick up girls with this car, he simply gave him such a frustrated appearance. Seeing Jo Luo's darkened face, Phil Coulson felt happy. But the next second, boom, the engine roared, Jo Luo stepped on the accelerator, and this classic car rushed out like an arrow from the string. Caught off guard, Phil Coulson was driven by the huge amounts of power and turned around like a ballerina in place for several laps and almost fell to the ground. Shit, Phil Coulson cursed angrily, and then began to adjust the cuff of his right hand. Then he found that his cuff was torn, like a blooming trumpet flower. Shit, driving a rusty classic car, Jo Luo glanced at the time and directly pressed the camouflage license plate device on the car. Then, the roar remembered that an old car that seemed about to be scrapped rushed right and left in the traffic like a wild horse, and rushed onto the highway. Hey, little Loli's parent conference is about to begin. Who made his unreliable father disappear again, and he can only attend the parent conference on his behalf. Speeding across the highway, Jo Luo arrived at the Crocia Middle School in Newark, Gotham, before 3 o'clock. As the car drove into the campus parking lot, its rusty appearance attracted a lot of attention. Jo Luo got out of the car in a suit and leather shoes and walked into the school with the crowd with the scrutinizing eyes of many people. Soon, he saw the blonde girl with twin ponytails waiting anxiously at the school gate. Hey, Joe, here, The blonde girl saw him and waved frantically at him. Joe Luo raised his hand and walked over quickly. Brother Joe Luo, did you drive a cool sports car today? The blonde girl first called him in bad Chinese, then hugged one of his arms and asked quickly. Joe Luo chuckled and said, "Don't worry, Mingdi, I drove a car that is even cooler than a cool sports car. I will surely surprise your classmates later." The blonde girl smiled, and something decent that had grown up rubbed up on his arm, making him embarrassed for a while. Hey, the United States girls are growing really well. Moreover, these ponytails, gee, suddenly my hands are itchy and I want to enter the studio. The parent meeting of the United States is quite boring, except for a few words with the super killing female Mindy's class teacher at the beginning due to identity issues. Joe Luo is basically in a state of being out of wondering things, there is no match. Coping. This made the super killing class teacher very helpless, and could only end the one-on-one parent conversation hastily. Afterwards, the boring class would end in a round of applause, and the super killer Mindy followed Joe Luo with her school bag like a worm. Brother Joe Luo, you were really handsome just now. Mr. Weston was almost mad at you. The super killing girl twitters, like a cheerful bird. The little girl's world is so strange, can she be called handsome when she is in a daze? Joe Luo was unable to complain, but kept a cool look on his face, waved his hand and said, "This is nothing, let's go and the car will be in front." The super killer became excited immediately, and whispered, "What kind of cool car is it?" Before Joe Luo could answer, some of her female classmates who walked aside started taunting. "Hey, I thought it would be great to find an Asian. What kind of cool car? Haha, Mindy, you stupid girl, he just wants to get you chuang, and only Asians will like you, a guy who is not popular in school. Mindy, take us to see that cool car, we also want to have a long experience." Quote. These girls from the United States, who are only 14 or 5 years old, but have grown up to be like adults, laughed and laughed, causing Joe Luo to shake his head for a while. Gee, the school violence experienced by super killing girls is evident. Do you want to make a call to Master Wayne and let him preside over justice? Joe Luo rubbed his chin and came to the parking lot with a dull-looking super killer girl. Brother Joe Luo. The super killer prolonged the syllables. Joe Luo recovered, snapped his fingers, pointed to his classic car and said, "No, this is a cooler car than the Batman." The super killer looked at his fingers, she collapsed suddenly, her head drooping. "This is what you said, a super cool car. God, you are even worse than my dad." The super slaughter girl has been unable to complain. The classmates who followed her were already laughing so much that they couldn't straighten their waists. "Ha ha ha, Minty, you should play Joker on the stage. God, this is the most interesting joke I heard today. Poor Mindy, you have never had anything to do with cool in your life." Joe Luo ignored these little kids, carrying the boring super killer girl, and threw her to the co-pilot. When he got in the car, he started and said, "Fasten your seat belt." The super slaughter girl collapsed and said, "Joe, can your car drive 40 miles an hour? You don't need to wear a seat belt at all." Joe Luo silently turned on the flight system. Under the car door, 2 flying wings spread out. "Girl, you don't know anything about black technology." He grinned and pulled the steering wheel directly. Boom! Orange-red flames blasted out of the 4 engines on the flying wings. Amidst the stunned kids and parents around, the rusty old car directly rose into the sky, and then disappeared out of sight. A long time. In this middle school, there were bursts of shocked roar. And the middle school girls who have always excluded super killing girls and secretly made a trip to each other looked at each other, and they all saw the surprise and fear in each other's eyes. Who would have thought that Mindy, who was bullied at school, should have such a powerful brother? As for the appearance of the classic car, people are just low-key. At high altitude, the super killing girl gave a self-taught performance of what is called a dolphin sound. Joe Luo smiled and said again, "You can fasten your seat belt." Suddenly, the super killer lowered her head in a panic and fastened her seat belt. The speed car also landed on a suburban road under the control of Joe Luo. "Why come down? I want to fly. I want to fly higher." The super killer pouted her small mouth and shouted very dissatisfied. Zhou Luo pulled her double ponytails and scolded, "Be quiet, do you want to be targeted by missiles when you fly to the sky? We don't have a flight license." EMMMMMMM. The super killer was quiet, playing with her double ponytails, tilting her head and staring at him curiously. So handsome, so handsome. The little blonde girl started to be nympho. Driving the car, Zhou Luo whistled and asked, "Mindy, do you want to be as handsome as me?" The little beautiful woman was excited, and asked, "I think, but what do you want to do?" "There is a gift from me in the back seat, you can take it apart and take a look." Zhou Luo pointed to the back seat. The little beauty raised her hips, stepped over the armrest box with a graceful gesture, and got the bag in the back seat. "Open the bag. Inside is a purple tights, a purple wig and a set of motorcycle keys. After going out, put on this suit and wig, and use the fighting skills your father gave you. When no one knows you, you are the same superhero as Batman." Zhou Luo is as good as the wolf grandmother who induced Little Red Riding Hood to open the door. The super killer hasn't really been born yet, so let me create it. Gotham City, there will be one more heroine. Illegal violence Lori. Chapter 11. After sending the super killing girl home, Zhou Luo still did not attack the 14-year-old Loli, because her father, who had disappeared for many days, returned. Zhou Luo fled in embarrassment in the dangerous eyes of his father, and a strange feeling of guilt arose in his heart. It seems that the look in the big father's eyes tells him that she is still just a child. So, Mindy is safe, then I'll go first. Zhou Luo, who is comfortable in front of women, retreats under the eyes of his father and leaves in embarrassment. Driving a classic car, he did not leave the unfathomable Gotham City immediately, but drove all the way to a manor in the northern suburbs. Private territory, no entry. Signs hung at the entrance of the manor, and security guards with live ammunition were on guard at the door, giving this elegant-looking manor a layer of murderous air. Suddenly, Zhou Luo parked the car at the door, took out his mobile phone and dialed a call. "Hey, dear Bruce, has your manor's security level increased again? Do you need me to help you contact Stark and get some more aggressive weapons?" On the opposite side of the phone, a picture of Bruce Wayne dressed up as a nobleman shook his water glasses with two blonde girls in his arms. He looked at the classic car on the front screen projection and teased, "Why, are you planning to go racing with me, Joe? Weapons, if I buy them from Stark Industries, you shouldn't need you to match them up, and don't forget that I can make those weapons myself." Zhou Luo raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth were drawn with a graceful curve. "Do not. Although your equipment is very good, it is still a lot worse than the steel armor that Stark is about to develop. Bruce, you want to drag a car with me, can you still have the strength to move the gear lever now? I guess you must have two blonde beauties with your arms around now, and talk to them about your ideals in life." Zhou Luo laughed unscrupulously. He knew Batman's usual appearance too well. That is a playboy who is not inferior to Tony Stark and richer second generation. Every day he takes off the Batman battle suit and becomes a playboy who drives countless Gotham women crazy. Had it not been for the strong biotechnology support of the Wayne Group, he would have been hollowed out a long time ago. Where would he have the strength to fight criminals? After being ridiculed, Bruce Wayne was not angry, just patted the two blonde girls and motioned them to leave. The two blondes were secretly upset, but they could only twist pea shares, trying their best to show their bewildering side, hoping to make this playboy kidney move. In this way, he can earn a lot of compensation. But obviously, Bruce Wayne's attention to Zhou Luo now completely surpasses these two blondes. "All right, Week, you can drive in, let me see how powerful the classic car that caused a sensation at Crocia Middle School today is." After speaking, the door of the manor opened slowly. Zhou Luo hung up the phone and drove to the front of an 18th-century castle unimpeded all the way. The gate of the castle slowly opened, and a picture of Bruce Wayne dressed as a nobleman walked out of the castle slowly, clapping as he walked. Well, welcome my friends, thank you for leaving your beautiful middle school girlfriend, to see me, a drunk man who is drunk and dreaming." Zhou Luo jumped out of the classic car, punched Bruce Wayne's chest with a speechless face, and muttered, "You are such a fool, Mindy is only 14 years old." Bruce Wayne grinned and teased, "You are more asshole. In the United States, you still have to maintain your unique virginity complex for Asians. I think you can only die alone." Zhou Luo rolled his eyes and said contemptuously, it's better than someone who was afraid of getting AIDS because of a sudden fever some time ago. Bruce Wayne, who was a decade older than Joe Luo, was choked and guided with a dry cough. Let's go upstairs. I have let all the idlers and others leave, this time I must beat you. Quote. Joe Luo curled his lips and muttered, Rookie, you can never beat me. Bruce Wayne twitched his mouth and retorted, I will definitely beat you today. Then, the two people walked along the escalator to the top of the castle. There are huge amounts of swimming pool, the blue water rippling in the breeze, crystal clear. Just a hot girl without a swimsuit. In order to play chess with me, you can change your lifestyle, amazing. Joe Luo gave a thumbs up. Bruce Wayne shook his head and smiled bitterly, and said, let's get started. Then, two people sat in front of the chessboard with chess on it. Two people play chess without rush or slowness. Joe, how is Stark? Bruce Wayne took a step and asked nonchalantly. Joe Luo also took a step forward and said, there is an old saying in China that a good person does not endure 1,000 years of life. The Tony is a typical scourge. He won't die so easily. Bruce Wayne laughed. Joe, are you talking about yourself? As far as I know, your love history is rich, but it's even more than Stark. Joe Luo shook his head and said, no, Bruce, don't compare me with Tony. I and him are the difference between civilization and barbarism. I dare to swear to God, I am sincere to every girlfriend, even if we break up, we are still friends. Tony is different, he and every woman are just pure collisions, and there is no communication between them. Quote. Bruce Wayne was dumb, pointing in the direction of Gotham City and said, the breakup is still a friend, then you dare to go to Xavier Genius School with me today. Joe Luo blinked, glanced at the direction of Xavier Genius School, and shrank his neck. Grandmas. Go to Xavier again, will I be burned to ashes? Thinking of that terrible woman, Joe Luo felt horrified. Hi, isn't it just breaking up, why bother to be hostile? Bruce, you know, I'm very busy right now, and Tony was taken away in Affen, I have to stare at my people to rescue him, so don't mention Xavier or anything. Joe Luo smiled nonchalantly, but his face did not appear embarrassed. Joke. Anyone who has such an ex-girlfriend will feel embarrassed. Bruce Wayne shook his head and laughed, it's just a stiff mouth. Joe Luo curled his lips and said, Bruce, you are the one who has a hardened mouth. You have not rested for at least 2 days, depending on your appearance. Hey. Bruce sighed lightly and threw the chess pieces in his hand on the board at random, with a distressed expression on his face. Batman cannot be fragile and must be in perfect condition at all times, but I can't. Joe, you know, my life is too tight, I need some entertainment. Originally, my pastime was very simple. I just vented my energy on a woman, and then just fell asleep. It just doesn't work anymore. Too much of this kind of thing will load the body too much. I never caught a cold before, but I had a fever last time. Therefore, I must open up a new kind of entertainment to relieve my stress. Any good suggestions? Quote, everyone knows that Batman is very strong. He doesn't have any super ability. He has become the Dark Knight of Gotham City by virtue of his super willpower, which can be called perfect physical fitness and master-level ability in various fields. But Joe Luo knew that he was not a cold and unfeeling god. He had been under pressure far beyond the limit of ordinary people all the time, which kept his spirit in a tight state. Only a woman can let him enjoy short-term relaxation. But the color is a scraping steel knife. Even Batman doesn't dare to be too presumptuous, otherwise it will usher in a decline in physical fitness. It seems that you need to cultivate a hobby that can relax your mind. Joe Luo rubbed his chin, then his eyes lit up. Bruce, do you like animals? Batman's life is too tight, becoming the Dark Knight of Gotham City. He needs to maintain an absolute calm mind and a high level of concentration when fighting criminals. And the life of teasing the dog, walking the bird and playing the eagle will not reduce his physical fitness, and even train some helpers. It is definitely the best lifelong hobby for Batman. I believe that with his willpower, he will not lose his ambitions. Opposite, Bruce Wayne frowned and asked, animals. Okay, I once raised a parrot. But what does this have to do with decompression? Quote. Joe Luo didn't speak, and took out his mobile phone, found some videos of the animal world and people and animals on the tubing, and then threw the mobile phone to Bruce Wayne. Look at it first. Bruce Wayne took the phone and looked at it without rush. As time passed, he gradually became addicted to it, and his frowning brows gradually unfolded. Joe Luo sat on the side and did not bother. After the housekeeper asked him to bring some high-end liquor and snacks, he sat on the side to drink and drink. Do-do-do. The mobile phone inside Shield rang. Joe Luo drank the wine in the cup and connected to the phone. Joker has escaped from prison, and Katana has escaped with him. On the phone, Phil Coulson's voice came, full of solemnity. Joker's combat effectiveness is not strong, and his most intimidating thing is unthinkable. Joe Luo's pupils contracted slightly, and then he smiled and said, "Don't worry, he can't afford too much spray." Phil Coulson nodded and said, "I really don't need to worry, because you caught him and threw him into the prison, and you also broke up his team. I think the first thing he will do after he escapes is to take you this fool is killed." Phil Coulson is a real grudge. Joe Luo complained and said, "Don't worry if I die, I will publish the good things you did in the toilet and the assistant before I die. You know I will do that. So, what should you do you understand? Quote, this fool." Phil Coulson was so angry that he hung up the phone. Then, the SHIELD agent began to dispatch, and the FBI, CIA and other agencies began to search for Joker's whereabouts. Putting the phone back in his pocket, Joe Luo took a sip of wine. Opposite, Bruce Wayne raised his head and said, "You seem to be in trouble." Joe Luo smiled and said, "It's not that, Bruce, but we are in trouble. Joker has just escaped from prison." Shit. Bruce Wayne's face turned green, just a little more relaxed, but Joker, the elusive fool, escaped from prison. Joe, I think the person responsible for your SHIELD prison defense system should be fired. Joe Luo raised his eyebrows and said, "I think so, but he wouldn't let it go. What can I do?" All right. Bruce Wayne is no stranger to Nick Fury, and the director of Nature's Way is not easy to mess with. He shook his head, turned on the topic, pointed to Joe Luo's phone and said, "Joe, I found that animals are really interesting. Do you have any good suggestions?" Joe Luo was overjoyed, feeling that Bruce Wayne was about to be taken the bait. He smiled and said, "Bruce, there is a slang term in China. Fishing is poor for 3 generations, playing with birds will ruin a life. Once I learned how to chase rabbits away, I have since embarked on a road of no return. If you fall in love with an eagle, look at the sky with tears in your eyes." Single quote. It describes that a person loves animals and forgets other things after falling in love with the life of animals. I think this is very suitable for you to relieve stress. Quote. After Bruce Wayne imagined it for a while, he felt that raising some small animals, playing with these animals or going out hunting in his free time, is indeed a good way to relax. Moreover, it does not conflict with his normal playboy rich second-generation personality. Okay, then I will start raising dogs and playing birds from today. Bruce Wayne readily agreed, making Joe Luo happy. What? Successfully fooled another one. Ding. After the host's efforts, Batman was successfully fooled and started a lifelong hobby, Stubborn Lord. Bruce Wayne, Batman, Diablo LV1, 0/5. Looking at one more student, Joe Luo smiled at the corner of his eyes and said, "Believe me, Bruce, you will fall in love with this kind of life soon, and you will become the first Stubborn Lord in the Western world." Batman smiled and said, "It just so happens that there are 2 well-trained hounds in my castle. Let's go hunting. The Stubborn Lord, it is interestingly called Roar, so from now on, me. Bruce Wayne will become a stubborn North American." Quote. What else can Joe Luo say? Then go. The 2 men drove a golf cart and led 2 mighty German shepherds to the vast grassland behind the manor. This piece is Bruce Wayne's private land, with a lot of wild animals. Under the guidance of Joe Luo, Bruce Wayne took 2 German shepherds and quickly started hunting. The German shepherd is very powerful, and it is absolutely powerful to push the rabbit out. It didn't take long to catch a rabbit. Bruce, you should reward him at this time, so that he can know that the owner can get the reward for catching the prey. Joe Luo sat aside. A fire had already risen, and the bottles and jars brought out from the castle were set aside. He is going to grill the rabbit on the spot. Bruce Wayne rewarded Demu, who caught the rabbit with a piece of beef and threw the rabbit back to Joe Luo, saying, "Joe, your method really works. I feel a lot relaxed now. Thank you, my friend. Quote. Joe Luo took the rabbit and said, if you really thank me, catch that Joker earlier. I don't want to be stared at by a lunatic every day. Bruce Wayne didn't say a word, and drove the two German shepherds to start running wildly all over the mountains. This kind of activity made him feel happy and relaxed. It made him feel more relaxed than sweating on those girls like worms. Joe Luo sighed speechlessly and started his own barbecue career. The smoke and chatter rise, the setting sun is blowing and the breeze is blowing, the weeds are wafting and the green waves are undulating. Because of Joker's escape from prison, Joe Luo simply stayed in Bruce's manor, waiting for this comrade Joker to take the bait. Bruce put on his Batman shirt again and drove his gorgeous bat chariot out. This time when he was punishing criminals, he met a super killer who put on his shirt and went out for the first time. After seeing Batman's process of punishing criminals like the flowing water, the soul of the superkiller was shocked, and boundless courage also emerged. The next day, Superkiller rode the motorcycle that Joe Luo gave him again, walking in the dark to punish evil and promote good. However, what she didn't know was that she already had a pair of evil eyes, watching her silently from behind. Call that brother. Then as long as you catch you can make that fool show up. Joker was in the dark corner, watching the super killer defeat the two gangsters with skillful fighting skills. A wicked smile appeared on his weird face. Ha ha ha, what a pure girl. Go and take her away. Joker said softly. Behind him, Katana flashed away, and once again appeared behind the super killer. The hilt of the knife raised, the super killer was directly knocked out by her, and then directly taken away. And the two gangsters who were defeated by the super killer girl were cut off directly by Katana. Then, do something big and declare my return. Joker's faint sigh dissipated in the wind, and then the area was calm again. Mindy is missing. That night, Joe Luo, who had a lot of fun at Bruce's manor, received a call from his father. Suddenly, Joe Luo looked slightly cold. Don't worry, I will find her. Hanging up the phone, he looked up to Bruce who was eating breakfast and said, Mindy is missing. It should be related to Joker. Suddenly, Bruce raised his head and put down the knife and fork, a solemn expression on his face. Joker is difficult, but we are not easy either. Bruce stood up and said, I immediately used resources to find Joker. But at this time, boom, the sound of huge amounts of explosion came from Gotham City, and among the huge amounts of fire, a cloud of mushrooms rose into the sky from Times Square in the center of the music scene. Moment, the faces of Joe Luo and Bruce changed slightly. He did it on purpose. Bruce's face is a bit ugly, and Joker's approach is completely provocative. Joe Luo breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that Super Killer is safe now. Let's go, they have already called Roar. As a host, you should be angry if you don't show up as a guest. Joe Luo patted Bruce on the shoulder and went downstairs first. Then Bruce changed into his Batman suit and drove his cool Batmobile out of the castle garage. A cool Bat chariot and a rusty classic car were parked side by side, and Bruce shouted, Joe. I will rush to the scene to investigate now. Don't show up for now, wait for my notice. Joe Luo nodded and said, Don't worry, I understand. Boom, the engine roared, and the Bat chariot rushed out. If there are no two dog heads on the rear windshield of the car, this scene will be much more cool and solemn. Hey, Bruce is a bit poisoned, and he doesn't even forget to walk the dog at this time. Joe Luo smacked his lips and started the car, following him like a ghost. In Times Square in Gotham City, the flames and smoke filled with smoke, and the people fled in panic everywhere with alarm bells. In other places, because of the explosion in Times Square, countless gangsters took the opportunity to rob. It seemed that in an instant, the entire Gotham City was in a mess. Boom boom boom. With the roar of the engine, Bruce's cool Bat chariot shuttled across the street and rushed to Times Square. At this moment, Times Square has been surrounded by police. In a fast food restaurant in the square, more than a dozen criminals are guarding dozens of hostages. In the middle of the fast food restaurant, Joker, with pale skin and lipstick with a grin, is leisurely drinking Coke and eating hamburgers. Come on, come on, come on. He opened his mouth wide, swallowing the entire hamburger like a demon, and rolled his eyes with Coke without caring at all. Outside, the police had put the entire Times Square under martial law, and Bruce couldn't get in at all. As the Dark Knight, his relationship with the police is not very harmonious. Crucially, he didn't want to reveal his true identity. But it shouldn't be difficult for him. After getting off the Bat Chariot, Bruce roughly surveyed the terrain and climbed up the building in front of him in a vigorous form. On the roof of the building, he locked the fast food restaurant where the hostages were being held. Afterwards, he passed the police blockade directly through the underground garage connected to Times Square under the building and entered Times Square. Oh, the quality of the police in Gotham City is really too low. Master Wayne made a complaint, and then walked out of a corridor carefully according to accurate calculations. The entrance of the corridor is just behind the fast food restaurant. After observing in secret for a while, Bruce's eyes flickered slightly, and then he attacked decisively. Boom boom. Gunshots suddenly sounded, Bruce's shadow instantly covered all criminals, and bullets poured out of blood instantly. Inside the fast food restaurant, there were screams, and one after another robbers were directly headshot, and blood bloomed. But Joker still sat calmly on the chair, eating hamburgers, not caring about the death of his surrounding companions. It seems that it is the most delicious food in the world. Papa. Joker clapped and looked at Bruce, his face cried and smiled. Batman, long time no see, you are still so good. Bruce turned his head suddenly, and the gun in his hand was aimed at Joker. Where is the little girl you took? Bruce asked in a low voice. Joker spread his hands and said, Say, I don't understand what you are talking about, why don't you shoot? Bruce's heart sank. This guy is really tough. The little girl who just set foot on the road of superhero is not here. Then, the danger is still not lifted. What do you want? Bruce said coldly. Joker was fearless, twisting his body, and said in a weird posture, No, I only want burgers and cola. Outside, the guarded hostages had rushed out and were protected by the Gotham City Police. At the same time, a group of special police officers with guns and live ammunition are also approaching cautiously. A sense of oppression came. Bruce's expression became more solemn, and he asked in a cold voice, Tell me, where is that little girl? Joker smiled evilly, pointing to the east and said, I heard that the fool from the east once caused a big disturbance in Xavier. Time is running out. After saying this inexplicable sentence, he simply raised his hands and walked out of the fast food restaurant. Sorry Batman, this time it seems I won again. Bruce had a weird face, looking at his back slowly walking out. After all, he didn't fire that shot. He knew how cunning this guy was, and since he dared to face him with his back, he must be prepared. Maybe as soon as he shoots himself, the little girl he hides in Xavier will be killed instantly. He dare not take risks. You did win, but it was not me who won, but the Joe. Bruce snorted, turned around at a very fast speed through the space enclosed by the police, and then rushed into the garage entrance. Suddenly, the Gotham City Police fried the pan for a while, and a team of police hurriedly chased them out. It's a pity that Batman is not a nameless man. He threw away the police in Gotham City after 3 times, and then dialed Joe Luo's number. Joker turned himself in and was arrested by the police. You can notify S.H.I.E.L.D. to come to the Gotham police station to pick up someone, but the little girl is not here. Joe Luo frowned and asked, What did Joker say? Bruce had a weird face and said, I guess he hid the little girl in Xavier, and the fool must have left something like a time bomb on the little girl. Joe, you need to be fast. Quote, Xavier. Joe Luo's face was green. That place used to be his paradise, but if you want to say the place he least wants to go, Fox counts as a Xavier Genius Youth School. However, it is very possible that the super killer was hidden there by Joker, and there may even be a timed explosive device, which made Joe Luo have to hurry to see it again. Joker. It's never over. He gritted his teeth and said, Bruce, you wait for me at the door of Xavier. Maybe you can let the ambulance from the Wayne Group Hospital wait for me at the door. Bruce smiled weirdly, and muttered, Well, I'll have the best orthopedic doctor and the most advanced emergency vehicle on standby at the door of Xavier. Joe Luo sighed, patted his Hungarian mouth, and started the classic car to the Xavier Genius School. On the way, he called Phil Coulson. Phil Coulson, Joker has been caught. You can take someone to the Gotham police station to pick up someone. As for Katana, it's not clear whereabouts for the time being, but I guess she will be caught soon. On the other side of the phone, Phil Coulson looked surprised. Joe, The speed is too fast. This is not like you. This sentence. Why is it weird? Joe Luo was too lazy to talk to Phil Coulson, hung up the phone, and stepped on the accelerator. Xavier Genius Youth School, referred to as Xavier's School, is a castle located in the eastern suburbs of Gotham City. Established by Professor X Charles Francis Xavier, the academy is dedicated to teaching young mutant knowledge and how to deal with the ability that controls them. It is an academy that even S.H.I.E.L.D. can't easily provoke. In the security booth at the entrance of the college, Andre, the old security guard, was listening to the old radio in a leisurely manner. Sudden, he saw Joe Luo jumping off a rusty classic car. His expression changed, he stood up directly, rushed out with a slight punch in his hand. Da da da. Sparks were shot from the muzzle, and the bullet roared through the air, pointing directly at Joe Luo. As soon as he rushed out with the gun, Joe Luo already felt his whole body stiff, and subconsciously reopened the car door and sat in again. Ding ding ding. The bullet landed on the rusty car, splashed a burst of sparks and then bounced far away. After hitting a shuttle, Andre put on a new magazine with one hand on his hips and walked to the front of the car. Phew, a mouthful of thick sputum flew out and landed on the windshield. You Joe Luo, you are not welcome here. Joe Luo resisted the nausea and scraped the thick phlegm clean, and shouted through the bulletproof glass, Andre, you can finally call my name correctly, I must have left a deep impression on you. Asshole, Andre roared. Profound. Definitely profound. Because you, Xavier is not at peace, do you think it is profound? Joe Luo gave a wry smile, and then said seriously, Andre, open the gate and let me in, I'm in a hurry to find Professor X. Andre raised the submachine gun directly again with a shuttle. Don't think about it. The bullet bounced away clinking. Joe Luo sighed and prepared to rush. As a result, the door of the school suddenly opened. After hitting 2 shuttles, Andre held the submachine gun in one hand and the remote control in the other. Boy, 2 bullets, I can only help you get here, whether you can get in or out alive depends on your luck. After finishing speaking, he also dumped his gray center point, which looked like an old Playboy. My Nima. Joe Luo gestured a middle finger to him and drove into the school. Shuman Shulu parked his car in a parking space next to the fountain in front of an old building, and then Joe Luo got off the car and came to the lobby. Entering the lobby, a Miss Mutant handed him a card and said indifferently, the professor is waiting for you in the office upstairs. Joe Luo took the card and smiled wryly, and raised his foot upstairs. Go up the stairs, turn the corner, and enter the corridor. Sudden, Joe Luo's face changed, and he turned around without hesitation. Joe, why is seeing me like a mouse meeting a cat? A cold voice sounded, his whole body stiffened and his face turned blue. He slowly turned around, with a calm smile on his face. Hey, Chin, long time no see. At the end of the corridor, a white woman with hair like a blazing flame, her body undulating and lingering with an icy breath is looking at Joe Luo coldly. Vaguely, there seemed to be a volcano ready to go, and it might blast him to pieces at any time. Da da da. The red-haired woman's heel fell on the smooth ground and walked in front of Joe Luo step by step with a precise rhythm. It's been a long time, but I don't want to see you again. The voice was still cold, with a thought of looking down at the people from above. Joe Luo spread out his hands awkwardly, and said, Jin, we broke up peacefully, didn't we? On the opposite side, the red-haired woman is one of the Omega mutants. Chin Jae Lei, who owns Phoenix Force, slightly purses her lips and her eyes are full of coldness. Yes, break up peacefully, so peaceful that I haven't even agreed, you start dating your new prey, right? Joe Luo smacked his lips, speechless. He looked around, and changed the subject bluntly, Jin, is Professor X there? I have something to do with him. Phoenix nodded indifferently, come with me. 30 seconds later, Joe Luo entered Professor X's office with her and saw Professor X sitting in a wheelchair. Professor, long time no see. Joe Luo proactively stretched out his hands and shook hands with Professor X. Joe, I heard that you are now in the S.H.I.E.L.D. You are in trouble. Do you look down on me as an old man so you haven't come to see me for so long? Professor X asked teasingly. Joe Luo smiled awkwardly and glanced at Phoenix subconsciously. What do you think of me? Did I prevent you from coming to the college? Phoenix snorts. Joe Luo smacked his lips and did not refute. Instead, he said to Professor X, "Professor, a criminal who escaped from S.H.I.E.L.D. kidnapped my sister. I suspect that he hid the person in the college." Where are you, sister?" Phoenix sneered. "It's the little girl you fooled again." Joe Luo grinned and said with a bit of toothache, "Chin, can you speak well? I'm very anxious now." Phoenix's eyes were cold, and he lowered his head and stopped talking. On the side, Professor X gave a weird smile and said to Phoenix, "Jin, go and check if a stranger has sneaked in." Phoenix nodded and left the office. After she left, Professor X knocked on the wheelchair and looked at Joe Luo and said, "Joe, I didn't want to care about your young people's affairs, but Chin is in a very bad state now. Because of the end of the relationship between you, the Phoenix force in her body has undergone some changes, and I am afraid she will not be able to control her power." Quote. Joe Luo's expression condensed, and he remembered the legend about Dark Phoenix. Can't grandmas? Could it be that Phoenix is unable to control his power this time because of himself, and eventually forms a second personality out of control? Joe Luo took a breath and said, "I know how to be a professor." Professor X nodded and said, "I'm old, and the affairs of Xavier's school have been handed over to Chin to deal with, so you young people can communicate by yourself." After speaking, he took control of his wheelchair full of science fiction and left the office. 10 minutes later, Phoenix returned to the office with the super killer. At the moment when she saw Joe Luo, the super killer Mindy rushed forward. "Brother Joe Luo, I thought I would never see you again. A 14-year-old girl is light and easy to push down, but Joe Luo is not in the mood but thinks about these things." Because, he could feel that the volcanic-like terrifying power in Phoenix was surging in the dark, as if it might burst out at any time. "Okay, Minty." He pushed the little girl out of his arms, and said with a serious face, "You are no longer a little girl, you are a super killer, and you will become a great person like Batman in the future, so you can't be so vulnerable anymore." After the superhero smoked a few times, she wiped away her tears, nodded and said, "Yes. I am a superhero. I am a superhero, I can't just cry. Especially not crying in front of this woman." The super killer glanced back at Phoenix, and secretly cheered herself up. As a woman, although she is still too young, she can clearly feel that Phoenix is hostile to her. It can also be guessed that the source of this hostility comes from Joe Luo. "Well, now that someone has found it for you, you can take her away." Phoenix looked indifferent, ready to see off the guests. Joe Luo twitched the corner of his mouth, remembering what Professor X had just said. He lowered his head and said to the super killer, "Mindy, you should go downstairs and wait for me first. I still have something to do." The super killing girl Zooey stunned, and repressed his emotions again. "I'm just my sister, what can I say? And this woman feels so scary." The super killer waded up and left the office with her head down. "I'm not escaping, I just thank her for saving me." Finding an excuse for herself, she rushed into the classic car as if to escape. Super killer finally breathed a sigh of relief. In the office, only Joe Luo and Phoenix were left, and the atmosphere became a bit solemn. "What, you don't leave now, do you want to experience the feeling of being thrown out again?" Phoenix spoke, a mockery on his delicate face. Joe Luo didn't speak, but stood up and moved closer to her step by step. He said nothing, just looked at her straightforwardly. Panic. Phoenix felt her heartbeat speeding up wildly, and under the pressure of Joe Luo step by step, she began to slowly retreat. "What are you going to do?" Phoenix's voice weakened unconsciously, and his expression was not as cold as before, but rather flustered. Joe Luo approached slowly, and finally picked up her long fiery hair, leaning to the tip of her nose and sniffing gently. "It's still the familiar shampoo smell. After breaking up, do you still wash the shampoo brand I chose for you?" The soft voice echoed, and the ice on Phoenix's face gradually melted, revealing a complex color on his face. "Why?" she asked nonchalantly. But Joe Luo knew what she was asking and why. He looked condescendingly at Phoenix, who looked mature and charming, and said in a low voice, "Jin, you should know that I work for S.H.I.E.L.D., but I am an ordinary person. I can't confirm whether I will leave forever in a certain mission. I don't want someone to break my heart for me at that time." Quote. Phoenix's expression became more and more relaxed, but he still said in an indifferent voice, "You look at yourself too highly, no one will break your heart for you." Gee, the mouth is quite hard. Zhou Luo smiled freely, took a deep look at her, and said, "You will." After speaking, he turned and walked outside. "Tonight, I will wait for you at the Prodi Hotel." After leaving a sentence, he didn't stop and walked directly outside. Leave Phoenix standing at the door of the office, looking at his fading back with complicated expressions. The Prodi Hotel is where they met for the first time. "Jin, would you still forgive that Joe?" Wearing goggles, the handsome Cyclops Kurt Summers walked into the corridor and asked with an ugly face. Phoenix raised his eyes and shook his head. "Skirt, it doesn't matter to you." After finishing speaking, he ignored the expression on Kurt's pig liver and left. Under the goggles, the terrifying energy in Kurt's eyes was brewing crazily, as if it would burst out in the next instant. "This is Xavier's school. This is Xavier's school." He read it silently in his heart several times before finally suppressing his anger. It's just the hatred towards Zhou Luo that has grown deeper into the bones. This playboy, when he came to Xavier, he not only robbed him of the limelight, but also robbed almost all the girls' attention to him. Downstairs, with the roar of the engine, Zhou Luo drove out of the mutant school. In the building, a white woman with brown hair but a large group of white hair held on to the window, looking at the fading old car with a complex color on her face. Complex emotions such as love, joy, hatred, bitterness, etc., constantly flash on the face. "I thought I would never see you again in my life, but when I was about to force myself to forget you, why did you suddenly appear again? You are a fool. The fool who makes people love and hate." Quote. The woman murmured, but her expression became more bitter. Zhou Luo saw his big dad again, and this time the retired police detective no longer crosses his eyebrows. While comforting the super killer, she invited Zhou Luo to have lunch at home. But Zhou Luo refused. He drove away in the classic car in the slightly regretful but determined eyes of the super killer. "Father, I want to learn the strongest fighting technique." The super killer turned her head. Her immature face was full of stubbornness. Dad frowned and asked, "Why?" Super killer said, "I want to be stronger. I want to defeat bad guys by myself instead of relying on the help of others." Dad is indifferent. After a cigarette, he stood up and said, "Then, starting today, I will give you special training when I go home from school every day. I hope you won't back down halfway." The lawful violence of super murderous girl Loli nodded vigorously, his face full of warfare. "Rest assured, I will be able to overcome all difficulties and one day I will be able to fight side by side with brother Zhou Luo." Driving away from the super killer girl's house, Zhou Luo rubbed his chin and called Batman. "Hey Bruce, did you find Katana over there?" Opposite, Bruce Wayne, who had already removed the Batman battlesuit, was teasing his newly bought parrot. "Joe, you can actually come out of Xavier alive, it's amazing," he exclaimed. Aside, his newly bought parrot also followed his tongue, "It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing." Zhou Luo's face turned dark, and he muttered, "Bruce, if you don't bring up this topic, I think I will be grateful to you." Batman laughed, then his face straightened and asked, "Why, didn't you find Katana in Xavier?" Zhou Luo shook his head and said, "Chin only found Mindy, not Katana. That woman has disappeared." Batman furrowed his brows, then stretched out and said, "It's okay, without Joker, a woman can't make waves." Zhou Luo nodded. A woman who does not have super ability and understands black technology will indeed appear mediocre in this world where heroes walk all over the floor. After chatting with Batman for a few more words, Zhou Luo asked him to build a high-tech battlesuit for himself before hanging up the phone. Batman agreed without hesitation. After hanging up the phone, Zhou Luo contacted Phil Coulson again, knowing that he had brought Joker out of the Gotham City Police and was now preparing to return to Pittsburgh to continue his detention. "Don't leave in a hurry. Wait for me in the western suburbs. I want to see my dear Mr. Joker." In the western suburbs of Gotham City, in a wilderness, Zhou Luo saw Joker sitting in his car with handcuffs and fetters eating burgers and coke. Phil Coulson, "The laws of the United States are really great for criminals." Zhou Luo complained, but didn't throw away Joker's burger and coke. "They are all people with status, and there is no need to do such dishonest things." However, his arrival caused Joker to choke his throat with a big mouthful of hamburger, and veins on his white forehead. He used coke to force the big hamburger down, clapped his hands and said, "Awesome. It is indeed S.H.I.E.L.D.'s famous socialite, but there are quite a few of your ex-girlfriends in Xavier Genius School, and you can still get out of it. You are great. Aside, Phil Coulson and several other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents raised their heads and whistled, as if there were beautiful fruit girls on the ceiling of the car. Joe Luo's face is a bit dark. Grandma's, who hasn't blacked out the history yet. Born to have an extremely strong affinity, and in such a plane where there are so many powerful people and beautiful women, it would be a shame if you don't talk about love more than a few times. It's just that the young and frivolous, talking together on the road of the scumbag, there are a little more ex-girlfriends. Joe Luo flicked his nails and raised Erlang's legs and said, "You are also quite amazing. You can get rid of yourself completely after doing such a big thing. In the end, only one charge of escape is left. I think maybe a lawyer or porcelain touchers are more suitable for you in this industry." Joker took another big bite of hamburger, as if he had a soft spot for it. No, you don't understand me, this is just a game. Roar. Suddenly Joe Luo got up and threw a punch directly. Vomit. Joker arched his waist like a shrimp, and the hamburger that was swallowed in his throat was kicked out by this kick again. His throat hurt and Joker's eyes were teary. But he stubbornly pushed the hamburger in his hand into his mouth again, and took a bite as if he was biting Joe Luo's meat. Joe, one day, I will kill everyone around you. It's like you took away all my companions. The moment he raised his head, his eyes were full of nervousness. Joe Luo smiled. He bent down, pointed at the burger in Joker's hand, and said, "You will never be able to beat me, just like the burger in your hand can never be compared with the food of China." After speaking, he turned around, ignoring Joker's stern eyes, and jumped out of the car. He took the cigarette out of his arms, threw one at random to other agents, and then lit it with a clatter. The smoke was blowing away in the wind. Joe Luo said to Phil Coulson, "Phil Coulson, you should treat Mr. Joker well, and don't let outsiders think that our S.H.I.E.L.D. is not at all polite." Phil Coulson looked speechless and said, "Joe, you have violated the regulations and brought personal emotions to work." Joe Luo glanced at him, grinned and said with a low grin, "But you are better than me. You brought your personal DNA to work and gave it to your assistant." In an instant, Phil Coulson's face turned green. This fool, grab a handle and stop letting go. Ha ha. Joe Luo smiled and patted him on the shoulder, got into the classic car against the wind, and left amidst the roar. Phil Coulson sighed helplessly and shouted, "Let's go, send Mr. Joker to continue serving his sentence, and you only have burgers and Coke. Can't you give Mr. Joker something else to eat? Don't let people think that S.H.I.E.L.D. treats prisoners too harsh." Suddenly, a few agents understood in seconds and got into the carriage. The car started, the four-wheel shock absorber shook slightly, and the carriage shook slightly toward Pittsburgh. Joe Luo didn't ask Katana's whereabouts, because it didn't matter if he asked. He came here simply because he wanted to get out of his breath with Joker. "I drove the car and came to Batman's castle, and had a sumptuous lunch that had been prepared a long time ago. Afterwards, he left the castle again and took Batman's good wishes to the Proti Hotel in downtown Gotham, where he opened a presidential suite. After resting in the room for a while, Joe Luo refused the special service suggested by the hotel attendant. Joe Luo left the hotel and went to the nearby supermarket. I bought a lot of ingredients in it, carried a big bag, and returned to the suite. Then, he started to get busy. At 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell of the room rang, and Joe Luo tied the apron and took the spatula to open the door. Outside the door, Phoenix stood in the pavilion, and when he saw his dress, a flash of remembrance flashed in his eyes. Come in." Joe Luo's tone was very natural, and in an instant it made Phoenix seem to have returned to the past, when there was no barrier between the intimacy. She nodded and walked into the suite. Suddenly, the lingering fragrance rushed into her nasal cavity, making her eyes bright. Guru. Subconsciously swallowed, the frost in Phoenix's eyes finally disintegrated completely at this moment. "You remember my taste," she said dryly. Joe Luo smiled and said, "Definitely, as if you still remember my favorite shampoo scent." The struggling color flashed in Phoenix's eyes, and then his face gradually became dull. "Let's talk about it. This time you asked me to come here to say something." Joe Luo sniffed, and rushed to the open kitchen in a trot. While turning over the contents of the wok with a spatula, he answered the wrong question and said, "You will sit down for a while, and you will be fine soon." Phoenix sighed and sat on the sofa, his eyes drifting. But subconsciously, her gaze will always pass over Zhou Luo's body, and then it will soften in an instant. This man still hasn't changed much. Zhou Luo worked hard for a while, and then pushed the last dish into the plate before he untied his apron. Then, with 4 dishes and 1 soup, he put them on the table and shouted, "Jin, wash your hands and eat." Phoenix replied hello, washed his hands and sat on the table naturally. On the table, the 4 dishes and 1 soup are all typical Chinese food, and they are basically typical Sichuan dishes. Mapo tofu, stewed sirloin with potatoes, pickled pepper chicken, stir-fried lettuce. The last tomato and egg soup. Every dish is Phoenix's favorite. She lowered her head and began to skillfully use chopsticks to chop the rice. Zhou Luo helped her pick the dishes. As she ate, tears fell from the corner of her eyes, but she was still stubbornly picking rice. Seeing her tears being swallowed with the meal, Zhou Luo's heart twitched. Just when he was holding a tissue to wipe her, Phoenix suddenly raised his head and took the tissue to dry it himself. Zhou Luo smacked his lips and withdrew his hand. Afterwards, a meal was finished in a complicated atmosphere. After the meal, Zhou Luo skillfully cleaned up the tableware and began to wash the dishes. Looking at his busy back, Phoenix's expression changed rapidly, and all the psychological defenses finally slowly collapsed. It seems that he is still the same him and hasn't changed at all. Stepping away, Phoenix slowly approached, and then hugged Zhou Luo from behind. Zhou Luo stiffened, his hands full of foam, and turned around and said, "Ms. Chin Gele, this requires another price." Moment. A complex color flashed in Phoenix's eyes. Pissed, she chuckled softly, as if she had returned to that afternoon, when she couldn't help but hug the man. He also answered her like this. "Joe from the East wants to get this job unless you can please me." Phoenix, with a small smile on his face as he did before, turned him around and raised his chin. Zhou Luo closed his eyes and said tremblingly, "Madam, you can defile my body, but you can't conquer my soul." Phoenix stood on tiptoe slightly, passing between his lips. "No, I will completely sink your soul." Zhou Luo shook his head and said, "I yearn for the holy light of heaven, and I will never associate with darkness." "Then, I give you holy light." Phoenix is like a female emperor, and Phoenix Force haunts her head like a god. "Kneel down and kiss my toes." Zhou Luo opened his eyes, smiled at the corners of his eyes, and shook the foam from his hand to wrap her arms around her slender waist. "You still remember." Phoenix sighed softly, and Phoenix Force dissipated. "I definitely remember. But I still remember, you told me that not only 2 hours after breaking up, you secretly dated Anna in the corridor, and even you two kissed each other through the plastic film." Her face was extremely upset, and there was a faint glow in her eyes. Zhou Luo said with a smile, "But you also said that we operate through a plastic film, just like playing a house when we were young. It can't be considered true." Phoenix sneered and said, "That's because Anna can't directly touch you, otherwise your memory and even your life will be swallowed by her. Otherwise, I think the two of you are in the corridor with no one, maybe you have already started directly." Quote. Like, at that time, it seemed that it was really possible. Zhou Luo smacked his lips, feeling that the room was full of sourness, and retorted decisively, "Impossible piano, you know I am not such a casual man, we Orientals are very reserved and shy." Phoenix still sneered, eyes full of mockery. "Oh, your fool's face is still that thick. You are talking nonsense, I want to sue you for slander." "Then you go and sue." Quote. "Forget it, I owe her after all, so I won't argue with you." Zhou Luo found an excuse and found a step down for his verbal failure. Seeing him as a cock that was defeated in a fight, Phoenix's face became softer again. Both people slowly fell silent. After a long time, she suddenly spoke. "Zhou, don't leave suddenly, okay?" Her tone was soft, completely different from the cold and contention before. Zhou Luo nodded and shook his head, and said, "Jin, we all play our own roles. You have Xavier's school, and I also have my own job. But this time, I will not disappear again." Quote. Phoenix's face changed, and he said viciously, "You are still like this. I will always leave a back path for myself, but this time I won't give you a back path." If you dare to disappear again, I will kill Shield. For an instant, a horrible breath bloomed on her body, and even her pupils were flaming up. Zhou Luo's expression changed slightly. This is Dark Phoenix. Because I broke up with Phoenix, the Dark Phoenix personality that didn't exist on this plane actually appeared. He hurriedly hugged Phoenix's slender waist, and then fed the demon with his body. After encountering a sudden attack, feeling the tumbling in his mouth, Phoenix gradually sinks and the flame in his eyes slowly dissipates. Slowly, Zhou Luo became unstable. In the muffled sound, Phoenix was attacked and pushed him away. Zhou, if there is another time, I will burn your things to ashes. Women are always duplicity animals. Zhou Luo curled his lips. He clearly felt that Phoenix was already emotional. All right. He stretched out his hands helplessly, and the look of loss on his face was beyond words. Phoenix sneered and said, well, don't act, I know you better than you think. Zhou Luo frowned slightly without refuting, and asked directly, you are too powerful to control it. Phoenix nodded and said, after you tell me that you broke up, my strength has expanded day by day. If I get emotional, I can easily lose control. This situation is somewhat similar to Captain America, but it is extremely dangerous. According to his understanding, this is Phoenix's soul power or willpower's inability to control the huge energy of Phoenix Force. Under such a sense of powerlessness, the personality split gradually due to the sudden blow of the breakup. If her condition is not stabilized as soon as possible and slowly recovered, she may lose control anytime and anywhere when the second personality is truly formed. Even, the first personality was eventually swallowed by the second personality and became the real Dark Phoenix. Zhou Luo didn't want to see such a phoenix. He frowned and thought, and it took a long time to unwind. To prevent Phoenix's current situation from deteriorating, she needs to increase her willpower and control over her power. So, there is a way to help her. Zhou Luo raised his head and asked with a smile, Qin, do you believe me? Phoenix opened his mouth, struggling flashes across his face. You hesitated. Zhou Luo pointed to Phoenix, his face turned a little ugly. Phoenix rolled his eyes and said, isn't it normal for me to hesitate? You once said that you would love me forever. What happened? You dumped me with a bad excuse, then turned around and dated Anna in the corridor, and even disappeared without a trace in the end. Quote. Like, is it so? Zhou Luo smiled awkwardly, waved his hand and said, these are not important. I have a way to help you solve your problem, but the premise is that you have to trust me. Phoenix shook his head and said fiercely, you don't think of using such a bad method to make me forgive you. Also, you haven't explained what happened between you and Clarice and Anna. Zhou Luo smacked his lips and said, I have already explained to you, they just admire me as you did before. Phoenix had a black line on his face, rolled his eyes and said, you are still narcissistic as you were back then. Zhou Luo suddenly took her hand and said, but you have changed and become a lot gentler. Thank you. Phoenix lowered his head speechless, and raised his head after a long time, and said, tell me how you can help me. Zhou Luo nodded, came to the kitchen and started to cut the meat, and said while cutting, Jin, the core of your problem is that you can't fully control the Phoenix Force, and at the same time, your inner fear of this power plus, my departure, the current problem appeared. Phoenix nodded and looked at Zhou Luo's eyes with a flash of sadness. This man is still so smart. But the crux of the problem is that your willpower is relatively weak, so I now use a method to improve your concentration, willpower, and control over Phoenix Force. Phoenix asked, what's the solution? Zhou Luo grinned lightly, pointed to the cut beef, and said, it's easy, let's go out for a picnic and barbecue. Barbecue. How does this help me? Zhou Luo explained. Barbecuing requires a relatively high file size of the flame. If the flame is too strong, it will be easy to burn, and if the flame is too small, it will not be easy to cook. This will test your control and ability. In the process of grilling, you need to always pay attention to the changes of the food and adjust the file size of the flame, which can train your concentration and willpower. In addition, during the barbecue process, different ingredients and food added at different times have different requirements for flames. As long as you can use Phoenix Force to complete a barbecue for 10 people, 100 people, or even 1,000 people, 10,000 people at the same time, Then your control of this power will become more subtle, and at the same time you will have a better understanding of your power attributes. The fear of this power in my heart will gradually disappear. Quote. Following Zhou Luo's explanation, Phoenix's expression began to loosen. Although she doesn't quite understand whether there is an inevitable relationship, subconsciously she is still willing to believe in Zhou Luo. Okay, I'll give it a try. This time, she agreed very simply. Phoenix agreed. Zhou Luo was secretly happy. Actually, Zhou Luo does not have absolute confidence in whether grilling can improve her willpower, but it is absolute that grilling with Phoenix Force can definitely improve her power control. The willpower is not sure whether it can be improved, but Zhou Luo knows that as long as she helps Phoenix start a lifelong hobby, she will definitely get great benefits when she upgrades, and it is very likely to help her solve the problem. The price is just to turn an absolute powerhouse in control of Phoenix Force into a barbecue Shih Tzu. Ding! After the host's efforts, Phoenix was successfully fooled and started a lifelong hobby, barbecue Shih Tzu. Jean Grey, Phoenix Barbecue Shih Tzu LV1, 0/5. In the cold system prompt, Zhou Luo put the cut beef into the bag, and then said to Phoenix, let's go, let's buy some barbecue ingredients and seasonings, and then go to Bruce's manor for a game. Let's have a bonfire dinner. Phoenix nodded and said, how is Bruce? Zhou Luo said with a smile, he has recently found the joy of life under my advice, so he has a very good life. Suddenly, Phoenix looked overcast and said, your suggestion. What other constructive suggestions can you have? It's nothing more than changing Bruce from a playboy to a more slutty playboy. She knows Zhou Luo too well. This guy looks harmless to humans and animals, but he is definitely a playboy. However, he is more able to play than painters like Bruce or Tony Stark. People play sociable, he plays well. Zhou Luo smiled bitterly and shook his head without explaining. No way, before the awakening system, the character was overdrawn very badly. Especially above women. Putting the bag and leaving the room, Zhou Luo took Phoenix to the supermarket to buy some food and spices. Driving in his super classic car, carrying the super strong Phoenix, he entered Bruce's manor unimpeded all the way. On the huge amounts of wilderness lawn at the back of the manor, Phoenix's skirt danced with the wind, staring dumbfounded at holding 2 dogs, 2 rabbits and a few pheasants hanging from his waist, and a bird cage in his hand. Bruce Wayne came in turmoil. God, what did you do to Bruce? How did he become like this? She couldn't believe her eyes. In the past, she was so handsome, who turned into the Dark Knight at night to clean up the Batman of Gotham City. Now she has become like this. Dirty and blood-stained clothes, messy hairstyle, holding 2 German shepherds and hanging prey in a bird cage, she has never seen such a dress. Even Zhou Luo, who was standing next to her, was taken aback by Batman's dress. What the hell? This buddy is too entertaining. The key is that his ability is too strong. In the Qing dynasty, the children of the Bannermen who tease the dogs to walk the birds and play with crickets, weren't they just like the birds? Even Batman's dress is even more sloppy. Joe, did you use Eastern witchcraft on Bruce? He turned out to be like this. Phoenix asked again. On the side, Zhou Luo had already thrown aside the ingredients and seasonings, and took out his own camera. Click, 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 pat pat. It's rare to see Batman like this. Zhou Luo's camera clicked, and more than a dozen photos were captured in an instant. And his extraction skill proficiency has also improved a lot. On the side, Phoenix asked for the 3rd time, asking, Joe, tell me why Bruce became like this. A woman's curiosity makes her want to know the truth immediately. Zhou Luo put down the camera and said, Bruce's spirit is too tight. He asked me for help and needed some way to relax, so I gave him a solution, which is to raise a dog and a bird to hunt. Then, he became like this. Quote, Phoenix covered his forehead with one hand and couldn't bear to look straight. But she has to admit that Batman in this state does seem to relax a lot. Hey, look who I saw. Chin, you actually showed up with Joe. Batman laughed exaggeratedly across the distance, jokingly and teasing Zhou Luo and Phoenix. Obviously, he knew their past. In the cage he was holding, a parrot jumped up and down, cried out strangely, Chin. Chin, Chin. Phoenix glanced at the parrot, and the parrot was so frightened that she didn't dare to learn from her tongue, and then she joked, Bruce, the gentleman's demeanor has been completely lost in your body. Batman looked down at his current state, and couldn't help but laugh. Haha, sorry, I recently used the method Joe taught me, and I am very relaxed now. So I can only apologize for being rude, I won't change a suit anymore. Quote. Phoenix exclaimed, Bruce, you really have completely changed. Joe Luo sighed faintly on the side. Bruce, you have no idle baggage like this. Batman waved his hand casually and said, who cares? Put on a battle suit, I'm still Batman. Well, what you said makes sense. Joe Luo gave a ha-ha, pointing to the rabbit and pheasant on his waist and said, Bruce, I invited Miss Phoenix tonight. How about a campfire dinner among friends? Batman raised his eyebrows, overjoyed. That's great. The bonfire dinner was held as scheduled, but to Batman's surprise, the bonfire was not raised with wood. It is the terrible flame formed directly by Phoenix using Phoenix Force. God, you mutant is terrible. Batman exclaimed. He was envious and jealous of mutants' ability. This kind of God-given ability, even without much training, can make him helpless. Phoenix turned his head and said with a smile, but we, mutant, are more envious of ordinary people's lives, but we don't get ordinary people's lives. Aside, Joe Luo sighed quietly, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. Suddenly, both Batman and Phoenix fell silent. This sentence is quite right. After being silent for a while, Batman smiled and took a sip of the water in the goblet in his hand. Joe, you are now quite sure that you are a philosopher from the East. Joe Luo shook his head. No, I'm not a philosopher. I don't even know what wrestling philosophy. He denied it in his heart. On the other hand, Phoenix has already started to do two things with one mind. While letting the so-called bonfire burn, the Phoenix Force is used to start grilling the ingredients that Joe Luo brought over. Laugh. The scorching smell hit, and a string of beef skewers instantly turned into coke. Click. Joe Luo raised the camera and recorded it as eternity. Phoenix raised his brows, and his face showed an expression of reluctance. Asshole, do you want to record these pictures so that you can laugh at me in the future? She turned her head and glared at Joe Luo. Joe Luo shook his head and said, no, I just hope that in 10 or 20 years or more in the future, turning out these photos will give you more touch. Ha ha, men really love to lie. Phoenix sneered, then turned his head and continued to try the barbecue. Come one after another. Laugh. It's scorched again. Laugh. Still burnt. Well, this string is better, but it's a bit burnt on the outside, and it seems raw on the inside. Continue. Phoenix refused to admit defeat and used Phoenix Force to grill over and over again. Slowly, she realized that her control of power seemed a little more subtle. This made her secretly happy. Aside, Batman smiled bitterly and asked in a low voice, Joe, can we still have dinner today? The ingredients are almost burned by the piano. Joe Luo chuckled weirdly and shook his head, it's your dinner. Chin and I came here after having dinner. Batman's eyes widened, staring at Joe Luo and muttering in a low voice, Joe, you is too treacherous. Joe Luo is complacent. Sudden, a dark shadow flew over, and Phoenix's cold voice sounded. This is the first barbecue in my life. Let my ex-boyfriend taste it. Joe Luo's eyes were quick, grabbing the black shadow and looking at the burnt meat and the uneven seasoning, even the lumps of salt. The face is green. Can. He opened his mouth, wanting to call for help. Cannot. Phoenix was decisive, and there was a flash of fire in his eyes when he turned his head. Joe Luo smiled and took a glass of red wine and explained, I just want to say, can I drink red wine for barbecue? Cannot. He got stuck. On the side, Batman, like Robinson, almost laughed. Nice job. It's true that the wicked have their own wicked grind. Joe Luo shook his head and could only pinch the barbecue, frowning and swallowing forcibly. He swears that he hasn't tasted such a complicated taste in his entire life and his previous life. Ups and downs. No, it's a hammer compared to this skewer. The moment the barbecue entered his mouth and the taste exploded on the tip of his tongue, Joe Luo seemed to have experienced a breakthrough. The feeling is indescribable. Anyway, the moment he swallowed the barbecue with difficulty, he was so moved that he cried. Grandma's, Lao Tzu's ability to endure is so strong. Joe Luo let out a sigh of air, and drank a sip of red wine to be shocked. Seeing this scene, Phoenix's eyes loosened again, and then turned his head to concentrate on studying how to enhance the control of Phoenix Force and grill the perfect barbecue. Aside, Batman suffocated a smile, patted him on the shoulder, and took out a half-eaten hamburger from his arms. Joe Luo's eyes widened. Bruce, you know how to learn without a teacher, and have you learned to prepare your own dry food? Batman blinked blankly, trying to swallow the hardened hamburger, and after taking a sip of water, he said, Joe, your whimsical ideas can always produce good results. To thank you for your help, if you don't hate it, I can divide this burger in half. Joe Luo turned his face to the side in disgust, raised the camera and started shooting with clicks. Seeing his skill proficiency skyrocketing, he felt a burst of joy in his heart. After taking a few more photos, he only put down the camera and opened the system panel after finding that his proficiency was no longer increasing. Super God Photographer System. Host: Joe Luo. Main profession: photographer, recording beautiful moments and extracting ability from photos. Main skills: 1. Photography. Record beautiful moments and freeze frames. The qualified photos taken can increase the experience value of extraction skills. 2. Extract LV2 43/100ths. A skill or attribute of the corresponding character can be extracted from the photos taken, and the current extraction ability completeness is 20%. Deputy occupation: life mentor, guide those who only know how to fight and kill lost lambs, develop their lifelong hobbies. Student: 1. Natasha Romanoff Black Widow, Foodie LV2 8/10. 2. Steve Rogers, Captain America, Dunsey LV1 3/5. 3. Tony Stark, Iron Man, Pimp LV2 9/10. 4. Clarice Fang, Flashing, Sunny Fun Model LV3 3/15. 5. Bruce Wayne, Batman, Stubborn Lord LV1 11/5 can be upgraded. 6. Chin Gray, Phoenix Barbecue Shishi LV1 6/5 can be upgraded. Hey, it seems that the Widow Sister has completed the evolution and has become a real foodie, knowing that she has gone out to find delicious food. And Tony Stark is a natural pimp, even if he is kidnapped, he can still pimp. Relatively speaking, the captain was a bit pitted, and it took so long to get a little experience point. Ding. Batman's lifelong hobby, Hard Lord, can be upgraded. May I upgrade right away? Upgrade. Ding. Batman upgrade to Hunter LV2. Mental freedom plus 10%. Upper limit of physical fitness plus 5%. Mental power plus 5%. Animal affinity plus 10%. The next upgrade experience is 6/10. Ding. The host has the third student who has been upgraded to LV2, with all attributes plus 20%. Among the cold system prompts, Joe Luo shocked all over, feeling that he had become stronger again. Even if he is still immortal, but he feels that he has definitely reached the critical point of mortal and transcendence. Opposite him, Batman, who was eating a hamburger, suddenly felt that his physical strength was recovering quickly, and his originally anxious mood suddenly became clear. At the same time, he could also feel that he was getting closer to the two German shepherds and the parrot in the cage. The magical feeling. He nibbled the burger in a happy mood, and Joe Luo next to him was to upgrade Phoenix's barbecue Chishi. Ding. Phoenix upgrade is barbecue Chishi LV2, concentration plus 10%, upper limit of soul power plus 10%, mental power plus 5%, power control plus 5%, the next upgrade experience is 1/10. Ding. The host has the fourth student upgraded to LV2, with all attributes plus 10%. Among the cold system prompts, Joe Luo stared at Phoenix closely, clearly seeing the joy of her face. It seems that she has realized that her control of Phoenix Force has improved. Moreover, there are other aspects of ability, which have also been improved. Really effective. Phoenix uttered a low roar, as if it was a divine enlightenment. The Phoenix Force, which was not well controlled, finally began to change. The barbecue in front of her screamed, the golden grease fell out, and the faint fragrance began to drift. It's a success. A minute later, the golden, delicious skewers fell into Joe Luo's hands. Phoenix raised his chin slightly, with a proud face, and said, reward you for a barbecue. Aside, Batman said with greed, Jin, this is not fair. Joe has already eaten, this skewer of barbecue should be eaten for me. Joe Luo bowed his head, without giving him a chance, he ate the meat skewers 3 or 5 times. Not bad, it tastes just right. He gave a thumbs up and exclaimed, Jin, your ability to barbecue is simply too high. Phoenix smiled proudly and turned around to continue the barbecue. Beside, Batman muttered in a low voice, hey, sycophants. After a few minutes, Batman squeezed a skewer of barbecue in one hand, while gnawing quickly, he exclaimed, Jin, are you sure you weren't the god of cookery of China in your previous life? By the way, Joe, the person who cooks the best food in China, shouldn't it be called God of Cookery? Joe Luo rolled his eyes and complained, Bruce, are you flattering? Rude. Batman's eyes widened, he slapped the skewers indiscriminately, and said, Joe, how can you practice creatures like the piano and the horse? They have nothing in common. Joe Luo curled his lips and muttered in his heart, they have a lot in common, at least they can ride. On the side, Phoenix, who controls Phoenix Force's grilling, became more and more proficient in his heart, and at the same time, the expression in Joe Luo's eyes became softer. It seems that this fool still cares about himself. If he doesn't have such a rich love history, it would be nice not to have so many lovers. She sighed helplessly, and then continued to barbecue. The bonfire dinner was very successful, and at least Joe Luo and Batman had a good time. It's a pity that Phoenix did not stay and reconnect with him in the evening, as Joe Luo thought. Joe, don't think you helped me a lot, I will forgive you. Leaving a cold sentence, Phoenix left the castle without feeling nostalgic. On the side, Batman suffocated a smile, patted Joe Luo's shoulder and said, Joe, don't be sad. As a friend, I can help you arrange 2 ladies. If you feel that it is not enough, 3 are fine. Sudden, tweeted. A Phoenix Force came through the air, passing by Batman's side, and his clothes caught fire in an instant. Bruce, if you dare to really find 2 ladies, the news that the controller of Wayne Group will be streaking in Gotham City tomorrow will spread all over the world. There was a cold voice, Batman shivered and jumped into the fountain next to him. The fire finally went out. However, his scorpion was also exposed. Click. Joe Luo has quick eyes and quick hands, and recorded this moment with a camera. The most beautiful shot, recording the beautiful moments. Oye, Joe, deleted the photos, we are still good friends. Batman's face was sullen, and he covered his pea-share egg with one hand. Joe Luo grinned, turned around and ran. Bruce, I will send the photos to the Chicago Sun tomorrow, and they will definitely give me a good price. Batman's face turned green when he heard Joe Luo's words. The Chicago Sun's reputation in the United States is not very good, especially in the eyes of upper-class people like him. This newspaper is like a dog-skin plaster, and it can't be shaken off by being stuck on it. This newspaper dared to report any report, and especially has a paranoid fondness for the style of the upper class. If his photo appeared in the mailbox of the editor-in-chief of the Chicago Sun, it would immediately spread in the United States. When that happens, his face will be lost. The point is, based on his knowledge of Joe Luo, this fool really dares to do this kind of thing. Joe, if you have something to say, we are good friends. Joe Luo picked his nose and squinted at Batman. He said, my friend, you just teased me fiercely. How do you calculate this? Batman raised his hand to surrender, and said with a smile, I apologize and I apologize, I shouldn't tease you. He apologized babblingly. Joe Luo flicked his nails and said, okay, well, don't worry, I won't send your beautiful photos to anyone, but this thing is in my private collection, so don't think I will delete it. Batman felt like a concubine and wanted to struggle for the last time. However, Joe Luo didn't give him any chance to turn around and enter the castle, and then walk to the guest room he was staying in. Bruce, I'm going to rest, you better not bother me. With a bang, the door was closed. Standing outside the door, Batman sighed, this fool. Bruce, it's not like a gentleman who speaks badly behind his back. Fight him, gentlemen. Well, you beast, go do your business, and Mindy's jersey will be ready and given to her as soon as possible. Joe, wait and see. Batman pressed a harsh word and left with an angrily. That night, the gangsters in Gotham City suffered and became a tool for him to vent his anger. Early the next morning, at the gate of the Gotham City police station, Chief James Gordon looked at the gangsters who were tied up by ropes in the yard, his brain aching. Is this guy Batman crazy? How come we are held in so many cells? On the side, the police officers were speechless. The gangsters all over the yard are like huge amounts of slaps on their faces, making their faces blue. In the castle, Joe Luo didn't go to eat breakfast right away after getting up. Instead, he sat on the lazy couch and turned on the camera. Finding Batman's photo from it, Joe Luo turned on the extraction skills. Ding! Extract character Batman skills. It is recommended to extract super willpower. Batman's strength, in addition to various skills such as super physical fitness, martial arts master, detective master, language master, interrogation master, escape master, disguise master, etc., the strongest is that his super willpower can make he remains calm and in control of his own strength and skills in any extreme situation. Definitely, there is Batman's powerful armor. It's just that he can't extract this stuff. Therefore, Joe Luo chose to extract super strong willpower without any hesitation under the suggestion of the system. Ding! Extract 20% of Batman's skills and automatically focus on super willpower, and the host will get 80% of Batman's super willpower. Among the IC system prompts, Joe Luo felt that his brain was disturbed by the power of invisible. Sometimes it was square but round, it was stretched and slapped. All kinds of sour feelings lasted for at least half an hour before he woke up in sweat. Lying on the lazy couch, he let out a sigh of relief, as if he had passed away. Bruce's perversion, only the strength of 80% of his willpower, is so terrible. Joe Luo spit out, and then he found out the picture of Phoenix Chin Jae lay with confidence. Without Batman's super willpower, Joe Luo would never dare to easily extract Phoenix Force. This kind of power is too violent. He is not as lucky as Chin Jae lay. He will burn himself if he is not careful. Fortunately, the willpower should be enough now, so he dared to extract this kind of power against the sky. Ding! Extract the character Phoenix skills. It is recommended to extract Phoenix Force. Ding! Extract 20% of Phoenix skills and automatically focus on Phoenix Force, and the host gains 20% Phoenix Force of Phoenix. Along with the system's cold prompt sound echoing in the ears, a terrifying and scorching power appeared in the dark and merged into Joe Luo's body. In an instant, that kind of terrifying heat that seemed to burn the sky and the earth exploded in his body. Well, he snorted, a smear of blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, and then instantly solidified and turned into a blood scab. Intense pain swept through his body. Joe Luo restrained with super strong willpower to prevent himself from passing out. Phoenix Force swept past, and he could feel his body constantly changing, constantly actively adapting to Phoenix Force. After another half an hour, he fell off the lazy couch and fell to the ground. A layer of black ash fell from him. That was the skin burned by Phoenix Force. Roar! Joe Luo let out a foul breath and got up from the ground. At the moment, he felt that his condition was great. Phoenix Force has been tamed under the control of super willpower. Although he needs some necessary practice to control this terrifying force, it will no longer burden his body. Take a shower. After a grunt, he entered the U-room and began to take a shower. In the mirror, his skin was much smoother, and all the bullet marks, knife wounds and other scars left during the mission had disappeared. And the spirit of his whole person has been improved. Hey, he's handsome again. Hey, awakening, it feels like you has become different. At the dinner table, Batman smiled and teased. Joe Luo tossed his hair and said, "This is inevitable. I am looking handsome every day." Batman rolled his eyes, too lazy to compare with him. Katana still hasn't been found. It is estimated that she has left Gotham City. Joe Luo nodded, already guessing. He waved his hand indifferently, and said, "It's okay, without Joker, she can't make too much waves." After eating breakfast, Joe Luo bid farewell to Batman and came to Xavier Genius Academy, but was told that Phoenix had left early in the morning. After the security guard Andre finished 2 rounds of bullets on a routine basis, Joe Luo asked him to tell Phoenix that he was back to Washington for himself, and told her that there was nothing to call her phone number at any time. Then, he drove out of the unfathomable city of Gotham and returned to Washington. Back to the penthouse at number 72 Sangley Avenue, holding a cup of pancakes, looking down at the city. Joe Luo looked calm. Click, take a picture and relax. After drinking a glass of champagne, he left the apartment and went to a remote beach outside Washington to start training his Phoenix Force. In the afternoon, Suicide Squad finally got news. They have found Tony Stark, but they weren't rescued by them, but after fighting with the 10 rings who kidnapped him, they rushed out in a strange steel armor. History is always surprisingly similar. Zhou Luo snapped his fingers, and the abstract fire horse formed by Phoenix Force dissipated in an instant. Falling into the sea water immediately caused the sea to boil frantically, and even some fish and shrimps were cooked directly and exuding the fresh fragrance of seafood. Bring Tony back soon. After leaving the beach and returning to the apartment, Zhou Luo changed into a formal attire and came to S.H.I.E.L.D. After passing the news to Nick Fury, he found Captain America, who was working hard to practice vegetable cutting skills. "Hey, Steve, how are your shredded potatoes?" Zhou Luo greeted Roar with a smile, then picked up his shield and sat down under his pea stalk. The corner of Captain America's mouth twitched, and he pointed to his shield and said, "Joe, you can disrespect me, but I think you should have a minimum of respect for the national emblem." Zhou Luo looked down and waved his hand. "Steve, I respect you very much, and I also respect the national emblem. So how is your potato shreds cut?" The temples of Captain America were about to bulge, staring at Zhou Luo almost violently. This, who puts his own words on deaf ears, is this respect? Seeing how he might burst his blood vessels at any time, Zhou Luo raised his hand and muttered, okay, isn't that stingy just to put down pea shares, why bother to be so serious?" Afterwards, he threw the shield over and asked for the 3rd time, "Steve, let me see your potato shreds." After receiving the shield, Captain America's face looked a little better, but when he heard him ask the potato shreds, his face flashed with an unnatural look. That, potato shreds, was taken by Phil Coulson to eat. Captain America's eyes were erratic. At this moment, the sound of footsteps sounded, and Phil Coulson walked in with a paper bag. Inside the bag, there are French fries. "Mr. Rogers, I have made the French fries in the restaurant ready. Would you like to have some?" Steve's face turned dark, full of embarrassment. Zhou Luo walked over, picked up a chopstick-thick French fries and stuffed it into his mouth. He turned around and said, "Steve, it's been 3 days, you are so good. It's not enough, but do you feel that you have better control over your power?" Quote. Steve smiled awkwardly and said, the first time I did this kind of thing, it was a bit slow. But the method you said is really good. I feel that I have a lot better control over my muscles now, at least not. There will be things like crushing eggs." Zhou Luo nodded, "That's good." He walked over and patted his shoulder again, and said, "Come on, cut 2 and show me to see how far you are." There are not many opportunities for Captain America to perform shredded potatoes. Zhou Luo clapped his hands and invited Phil Coulson to sit down and observe. Captain America swallowed and suddenly felt a sense of fear that he hadn't lived in for a long time. It's just like, the pupil was drawn by the teacher and asked him to recite the text. "God, you must play well this time." Captain America twisted his neck, picked up the kitchen knife and potatoes, took a deep breath and cut the first cut with a sense of ritual. Next to him, Zhou Luo patted Phil Coulson on the shoulder and said, "Phil Coulson, there are not many opportunities to see Steve cutting potatoes. Don't you go and take a photo?" Phil Coulson has a question mark on his face. Group photo. Cut a potato, what's a good photo for? Phil Coulson, don't share your personal DNA. Okay. Phil Coulson raised his hand to surrender, and approached Captain America with his head full of question marks, compared to a scissor hand. Oye. Zhou Luo picked up the camera and clicked it. Then, the experience value increased. Crack. Captain America was so distracted by his actions that he almost shredded the cutting board in one cut. He raised his head to speak but stopped, and finally held back forcibly. Can't argue with the Joe, even Natasha Romanoff couldn't resist even Natasha Romanoff, let alone himself. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.